Hello and welcome back to Clock Spinning, the podcast of Magic's history as told card by card through Cube. I'm Austin, and with me, as always, is Connor. How are you today, Connor?
You know, I'm good. It's very good to be back.
It is good to be back. Yeah, I guess we could start with our little hiatus. So we're not gone. We're not done podcasting, but we both just got super swamped with a bunch of new stuff at work and career changes and stuff. So we've been a little bit off the Magic bandwagon, but we're glad to be back talking about more obscure Kamigawa cards.
For sure. And today we're finishing up green, the last of our colored cards in Champions of Kamigawa. So it's kind of a big moment.
That's right. After today's episode, we'll review 250 or 251 if you count both brothers Yamazaki, which might be a stretch. Colored cards in Champions, which is pretty cool.
Sure is.
All right, should we dive in?
Let's do it. Okay, so first up in today's episode, we've got what I don't think can be called an iconic Champions of Kamigawa card. It's Lure.
Woo!
1 GG for an enchantment aura, enchant creature. All creatures able to block enchanted creature do so. So this is, absolutely a classic card. It's been printed in every core set from Alpha all the way up through 8th edition. It also showed up in Magic 2012 and most recently in Iconic Masters. It's kind of fallen off the radar recently, but it used to be just a core set staple. And it's also in Champions for some reason.
Yeah, this is one of its last, I would say, like, quote unquote, real printings, like printings into standard. It showed up in, as you said, 8th edition, showed up in Champions, 10E, and then M12 was its last real standard printing. So this card has definitely fallen off the map. I think just because 3 mana for an aura that does this just doesn't match up for the modern rate.
Yeah, it is. It is a little tough to fit into a more modern deck. As far as where it fits into the cube, it definitely is not an icon of Champions. It doesn't have anything to do with the lore or the flavor of this set at all, obviously. But one of our listeners, Tap Tap, made the really great point that this card and the next card that we're going to talk about are kind of Green's only removal options in a way, in the sense that Lure would force your opponent you could use it to force your opponent to block a certain creature and, remove creatures in that way. It's not the most elegant or cost-effective solution, but it is a kind of removal option. And Lure also, creates the possibility of making all your other creatures basically unblockable. So it's something to think about. I don't know if, it doesn't really make me like this card.
I like it more for the second scenario. I think the problem with using this as removal is that, that you have to invest 2 cards as the baseline, right? Because you got Lure plus the creature that's probably going to die. If it's a big enough creature like a Moss Kami or something, you'll probably kill 2 things and basically get a 1-for-1 trade out of it. But like, I don't know. I feel like a Moss Kami has better things to do, like, just killing your opponent. Like, I still want to include this because I like it more for the game ending effect, right? Of you can throw this on a creature late game, swing in for final damage. It almost acts like a sleep effect or something. Like it's almost like it's tapping down your opponent's blockers.
Yeah.
And I think with that in mind, it's okay. Like I have it as a 1x mana. I don't think it's an amazing effect, but I think it's a fine thing to have, one of floating around the format.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the removal thing is, it's not just a 2-for-1. It's also, the creature that you put this on has to, in order for there to be removal, that creature has to like have enough power to remove something. And a lot of creatures just don't.
They don't. And this block also has literally no death touch or basilisk kind of effects. So the original Lure from Alpha, right? The original combo with Lure was to put Lure on your, what was it called? Thicket Basilisk, I think was the one in Alpha, and use its pseudo death touch ability to wipe your opponent's board. But from my searching, I don't think there's anything in Kamigawa block that can take advantage of that synergy, which is kind of sad to miss.
Hold on.
Okay.
Cruel Deceiver. Situational death touch.
No.
And you got 2 power on that bad boy.
How much mana would we be talking about there? That would be 2 for the Deceiver, plus 3
Yep.
for Lures, 5
Yep.
plus 3. So we're talking about 8 mana, but you could kill 2 creatures.
Yes. And well, that's all assuming that the Deceiver's ability actually works.
Right. Okay, I don't think that's actually worth
Yeah,
thinking about.
that's not
I
making
am
it.
thinking about it. Okay.
That's not making it any better in my mind, but that there is the option.
I do have a real soft spot for this effect. Like when I was first learning to play Magic, the first kind of quote unquote game ending combo I experienced, it's not really a combo, but was like Taunting Elf, which is a green 0/1 from Onslaught that just has this effect and nothing else. And I remember the guy who taught us Magic, Nick, using that against us and being like, what do I do? I can't block. I'm just dead, because, we didn't have any removal. We didn't understand. None of us understood really how to play the game. So all games ended in gigantic board stalls, which now that I'm talking about it, it sounds a little bit like Kamigawa Limited. So maybe Lure has something going for it.
Maybe. So I see you put this at a 1x meh, and I had it at 2x meh, but I think I'm inclined to just have one.
Yeah, it feels. I could see too. It feels more like a 1x effect to me. I just. I definitely don't think there's decks that want 2 lures.
No.
So I think one of them's probably fine.
All right, let's go with that.
I was sort of chuffed before we move on. I was sort of chuffed to see that they still print lure effects. Not a lot of them, but I kind of worried with this thing dying that lure itself was going away. But in the last couple of years, they printed 1 in Zendikar Rising, Taunting Arbor Mage, strangely 2 in Theros Beyond Death, Tree Shaker Chimera, and Nessian Boar. So they're still printing a smattering of lure effects, which made me happy. Okay, let's talk about the other card you alleged was removal. Matsu-Tribe Decoy, 2 and a G for a 1/3 Snake Warrior. 2G, target creature blocks Matsu-Tribe Decoy this turn, if able. And whenever Matsu-Tribe Decoy deals combat damage to a creature, tap that creature, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So we got a 3 mana 1/3 with the pretty disappointing Orochi signature poison ability, and it can also force things to block it. I think this thing's pretty terrible. So it's a 3 mana 1/3, which does poorly against a lot of things in the block, and in particular does poorly against the literally 20 creatures that are 3 drops with Bushido. I think it's this Venom effect I think very little of, and I don't know, being forced to block things. I want to let you talk, but real quick, I puzzled out the scenarios, and from what I can tell, basically, the Matsu-Tribe Decoy can snipe 1/1s, but he still might die to another blocker, and also it's a 1/1, so who cares? He can sort of annoy other 2-power creatures. He can't kill them, but he can slow them down a little bit, but that's also kind of a who cares. Or he can block 2-power creatures and also slightly annoy your opponent. Just nothing about him is good from what I can tell.
Yeah, I don't like this at all. Theoretically, this is removal of, I guess, your opponent's 4 mana 1/1 Aki. Best case scenario.
Okay.
But that's the best case scenario. To me, this is just a 3 mana 1/3, bad enough. And then it has this lure-esque activated ability that is tied only to this creature that costs just as much as an actual lure on a body that can only deal 1 damage. I don't like this at all. And I completely agree that this sort of Orochi snake poison effect of, basically freezing a creature, completely unexciting. I don't think it really adds anything here.
It feels so unimpactful that it could have been just sort of trinket text. They could have just priced the cards as though they didn't have that text and just kept it on there for flavor if that's what they wanted. I honestly don't understand why it's even there.
Yeah. And you really are kind of paying a premium for it on all the snakes that have it, basically.
Yeah. I also find the art here sort of incredibly dorky.
Oh, it's great in a terrible way.
You want to talk about it?
Sure. So, so this is, an Orochi, a snake warrior. So all of them have 2 legs, 4 arms, snake heads to varying degrees of snakiness. But this guy in particular, there's so many things about this art that just feel wrong. The subject of the art, the decoy, is supposed to be up in a tree, it looks like he's standing up in a tree kind of firing a bow off to the right, but he's not really in the tree. Like he's just
No.
sort of posed in front of it. Like the tree
Yep.
doesn't come under him to give him any support. He's not like standing in a way that suggests that he would actually be in the tree. There's just like a tree behind him.
Yeah, which makes you think like, is this tree like is its trunk like a foot tall? Like it's just kind of confusing.
Yeah, it's very strange. But even stranger than that, he appears to have human hands
And human hair.
and human hair. Well, they all have human hair, but this guy in particular, like he's got all of his skin up to the hands is like white, like ivory
Good
white,
point.
because he's a snake. And then you get to the hands, and they're literally like human hands with
Flesh
like,
tones.
it's hard, like with flesh tones, and it's hard to tell with the picture being so small, but it looks like they also have like 4 fingers and a thumb, where all of the other snake folk have 3-fingered hands.
Okay, let me do a forensic.
So he has like
audit
actual
here.
human hands just grafted onto these 4 arms.
Huh.
And then I got one more observation here about the weirdness of this art. So he's firing a bow off to the right with 2 of his arms, but remember he has 4. So the other 2 arms are reaching behind his back and pulling out a katana, like drawing the weapon over his back as he's firing the bow. Like, what is the plan here with both of these weapons?
He's ready for all. See, that part's cool. You know, he's if he's got 4 arms and he's using all 4 of them to the max. I mean, don't you think that's sort of you know, like if you had 4 arms, why not? Why not be ready with the katana?
Well, I feel like if I'm gonna, if I've got the katana right there while I'm trying to fire a bow,
it's gonna get in the way.
It's gonna get in the way. I might
Yeah,
even
it's gonna
cut the
throw off your
bowstring on
balance
accident.
too. Yeah,
especially if I'm barely clinging to a tree like this.
That's a good point. I watched a lot of biathlon during the Winter Olympics, and one thing I learned is you got to hold really still when you're shooting stuff.
There you go.
Important takeaway. One little bit of trivia I found researching this card that I thought was fun is in a set on the Wizards Mothership article on the Wizards Mothership from about 10 years ago, they talk about where these tribe names come from. So all of the Orochi are in different tribe. We got like Matsu-Tribe Decoy here. Later on, we'll get kind of shaman-y ones. We'll get all kinds of different names. And apparently they're all named after Japanese names for different kinds of trees. So I'll just quote from the article here. If you're familiar with the Kamigawa glossary, you know that the different tribes of Orochi are named after tree types. But did you know that each tribe is so named because it represents a quality of its namesake? For example, the Matsu, pine tribe, are archers. Pines have needles, get it? A bit more on the subtle side, we have Kashi, oak, known for its strength, and Sakura, cherry, often used as a ceremonial tree, thus the connection to the tribe of shamans, which I thought was pretty cool. It seems like a lot to ask players to pick up on that. Like I've been looking at Sakura-Tribe Elders for like 18 years, and I never really picked up on why. I just kind of was like, Sakura, sure.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I knew Sakura meant cherry, but tree, but I never really thought about it. I was just like, yeah, Sakura-Tribe Elder, sure.
Yeah, I guess. Why do you think that is? Do you think it just sort of like formed in our minds at an age where we didn't know what Sakura meant, and we just never thought about it again?
I think so. Yeah, I think it predated me knowing what the actual Japanese word was.
Yeah. Well, we must have been either watching Cardcaptor Sakura or
oh my goodness,
having recently watched it at this time. So there's a deep cut for you.
Should we do a season on Cardcaptor Sakura? Rewatch it and rate the episodes?
No, that sounds good. Definitely on topic.
Yeah, I think our listeners would be extremely interested in that. I think the other thing we have yet to do is rate this. So I had this as a 1x med, but to be honest, that feels like kind of a cowardly vote on my part.
I just want to cut this. I don't see what it's going to do.
Okay, insta cut.
All right, next up, we've got a big one. It's Moskami. 5G for a 5/5 spirit with trample. That's it. I think Moskami is probably in our the top 3 cards that you and I have referred to constantly when reviewing other cards on the show. Maybe along with Kitsune Blademaster and probably like Glacial Ray. Like we talk about Moskami all the time as like the large creature that you're going to be trying to get out, or like the expensive creature, or the sort of bomb that's going to finish the game for you.
Yeah.
And he really is like 6 mana 5/5 with trample is like pretty close to a spirit dragon. Just huge value.
Yeah, Spirit Dragon is right. Rich Hogan, I think I mentioned a couple episodes ago, called this card the Land Dragon in a contemporaneous limited review, which I thought was sort of wonderful. I think it's funny to compare him to famous meme card Colossal Dreadmaw. And of course, Colossal Dreadmaw, 6 mana, 6/6 Trampler. This guy 5/5. So he's obviously a little weaker, but the fact he's even in the conversation with, a pretty solid kind of staple limited card from today, I think speaks well for the Moss Kami. Like, he just hits hard. And he doesn't ask a lot of you to do it. And, the soul shift value here is totally real and plausible. And once you get, you land a Moss Kami twice on the board, like, you're really doing some damage at that point. It's pretty hard to keep up with that, just that sheer stat line in this format.
Yeah. And, well, he's actually also in a color that has soul shift, So it's reasonable. And that has soul shift this big. So it's, like, reasonable to expect that you'd be able to actually get it back on that.
Right. Yeah, there's a couple Soul Shift 7s, Soul Shift 8s. We've, of course, got Iname, Life Aspect, too. So, yeah, it's pretty plausible that Moss Kami might make it back to your hand at some point.
Yeah. There was an exchange between a couple of commenters on Gatherer for this card that I just... I enjoyed it immensely, and I wanted to share it here. So back in, I think the first post was in 2010, maybe. And someone said, he's big, has trample, and he's a common. I like him a lot, and I can't find anything wrong with him. Pretty much agree with that.
Here, Evid.
4 years later, the Wrath of Shane replies to Evid, saying, it's a limited filler. Card is a pile of trash bags and constructed when compared to things like Baneslayer Angel. It's like that. That does not seem like the most fair comparison you could make. But just the juxtaposition there, like how this guy immediately jumped to Baneslayer Angel from Moss Kami.
I really miss Gatherer comments, and I love that this guy comes back 4 years later to dunk on this guy. That's brutal.
Yeah, actually, he said Bankslayer Angel, not Baneslayer Angel,
which I also loved.
I really like that. I was like, Bankslayer Angel, what is that?
That's pretty good. Yeah, well, so expensive because it was such a format-defining card. But yeah, I like the idea of, like, Moss Kami can't measure up to what was, at the time, the best creature printed, basically, in the history of Magic. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty high bar.
Yeah.
I really like the art here. It's fairly photorealistic. I can see criticizing it for being almost, like, too still or too... kind of like, it doesn't really quite look like a creature. It's very foresty, and you really have to look at it to go like, oh wow, jaws and claws and stuff here. So it looks almost like a tree. I don't know. I really like the kind of the way in which this looks very much of the forest, very mossy, very textured.
Not
convinced.
I'm not a huge fan of it. To me, it just kind of looks. It is like really photorealistic, except for these very subtle claws and teeth. And to me, it just kind of looks like a photo of tree roots.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it just there's like nothing about it to really latch onto.
It does kind of lack a strong focal point, but for me, I like the kind of brooding menace of it. I also like the flavor text here, which I think does a good job orienting you to the basic rules of Kamigawa in a way that I think more cards needed to do, honestly. So it says, Kami manifest in the form of whatever they embody in the physical plane. Some tower in the shape of moss or bark, while others take forms beyond mortal imagining. That flavor text could appear on basically any Kami in the block, but I think it's helpful for the kind of casual player who's like, why did these cards look so weird?
Yeah.
And Moss Kami at least explains why. Although I think in a way, Moss Kami is one of the less weird looking Kami.
Yeah, I mean, it says Moss Kami, and there's a lot of moss.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it doesn't need explanation in the way that, like, I don't know, like Lantern Kami or something, or
right,
Kami many other abs. Yeah.
So where do we land on this rating wise? It's a definite auto include for me. I
easy auto include. Yeah.
The trickier part is maybe how many copies we want. I said 2.
2 feels right to me. I think I wavered between 2 and 3. It's super common it's a common, right? And so like like retail limited, this card shows up all the time, and they're fairly easy to get a hold of. And so I think like that's where I lent a little bit, or I was flirting with 3, because I feel like this shouldn't be something you have to treasure or prioritize. It should be like, if you're in green, you can get a Moss Kami, and you almost always will get a Moss Kami.
Okay, I kind of like that. Like, usually we haven't adhered too closely to trying to like recreate a limited format here, but I kind of like the idea of bringing that in a little and having Masakami be someone you can count on.
Okay, yeah. Do we want to start at auto include 3x then?
Let's do it.
Boom. Okay, let's go to our final Myojin, the Myojin of Life's Web. 6 G. That's 9 mana for an 8/8 legendary creature spirit. Myojin of Life's Web enters the battlefield with the divinity counter on it if you played it from your hand. It's indestructible as long as it has a divinity counter on it, and you can remove that divinity counter to put any number of creature cards from your hand into play. So this card is awkward. I think it's most of the Myojin are awkward, honestly, but I think this one is maybe the most awkward of all of them. Simply because if you've gotten a 9 mana in green, I think you just don't need to cheat on mana at that point, right? You've already proven that you have all the mana you need. You've probably cast most of your things. You might have 1 or 2 things left to cast. I mean, it's not that you're getting no value out of this, but I think the value you get is pretty marginal. At that point, you're looking at a 9 mana 8/8, which isn't a total joke. Like, that's a huge body in this format, which is nice because most of the other Myojin have come with these weird, anemic, terrible stat lines. So I don't want to totally discount that, but I feel like the effect here is kind of, it feels off to me.
I was mostly rating this, honestly, as just a 9 mana indestructible 8/8, which is, way better than any of the other Myojin. Both in terms of just the absolute stat line and like the rate of mana. The blue Myojin is 10 mana for a 3/3. Black, you're paying 8 mana for a 5/2. So like just getting an 8/8 for 9 mana here that's indestructible to boot is something by itself, I think. But yeah. I completely agree that the effect here is really, probably most of the time, it's not going to matter. Like it's hard to see why you would need this if you're at the point that you can play a 9 mana 8/8. Like, A, what do you have left in your hand at that point? And B, even if you have something left in your hand, like, you have the mana to play it.
Yeah.
I was trying to like find other cards in the block that could kind of set something up where you've played Myojin of Life's Web and then you like refill your hand with a bunch of creatures that you're cheating out if you're somehow not already winning with an 8/8 indestructible. There's one sorcery called Enshrined Memories. It's XG. It lets you look at the top X cards of your library and grab any creatures from there into your hand. There's a Name, maybe, which puts a bunch of spirits. A Name life aspect puts a bunch of spirits back into your hand if they're in your graveyard, and that's pretty much it. Like, those 2 cards are kind of the only things that could like set up a big combo with this. So I feel like the effect is just sort of a non-factor, and we're talking about a 9 mana 8/8 indestructible here.
I'm somewhat persuaded by your 9 mana 8/8 indestructible at least being worth the trial. Like, ramp is a surprisingly big part of green's color identity in this set. We've got Kodama's Reach and Sakura-Tribe Elder, most notably, is like, all-time all-star ramp cards that are going to appear in good quantity. So it's not as unreasonable that you'll cast this thing as it was for the other Myojin. I think you got a decent chance of hitting 9 mana.
Yeah, and if you're going for the like, Budoka Gardener strat of getting to 10 lands, then you're already on the way.
This is a pretty good thing to slap a lure onto.
Sure is. That's going to clear out some creatures.
Yeah, that's gonna shut your opponent down pretty quick.
Yeah.
Little trivia bits. I when I was thinking about other scenarios for this card, like outside of Cube, I did start thinking it would be very funny to say put all 6 Eldrazi Titans into play with this. That just amused me, and then Exodia Obliterate ran through my head, and that tickled me further. So this card tickles my kind of kitchen table Magic side.
Yeah, it's like it seems like a very fun effect. It's just an awkward one to get much value out of here.
All the Myojin, to me, it's awkward that they don't let you cheat them into play. And it's especially awkward with this one of like, oh, this is the one where it would be most cool to cheat it into play, and you can't.
Yep.
I'm also not a huge fan of the art here. To me, all the other Myojin have this kind of sense of raw power in the art. And this one, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's just kind of boring and flat to me. It's like a woman standing in front of some trees, basically.
Yeah, kind of another Kev Walker dud.
Ouch. I don't like that because I love Kev Walker.
What's going on? I know.
I mean, he's got some. I feel like a lot of the other Myojin had pretty good art, don't you?
Yeah, he didn't do all of them, did he?
Yeah, Kev Walker did all 5 Myojin.
Whoa.
Yeah, and a lot
How
of them
did I
were
just
bangers.
realize this? Yeah, the other ones are quite a lot better.
Knight's Reach, Infinite Rage,
Knight's Reach is great.
Seeing Winds. I think Seeing Winds is my favorite. It's so kind of messy and abstract and spooky.
This one, not so much.
Yeah, it's like okay, it's pretty forgettable. So where do you land on this? I had it as an Instacut, but I think you're making a stronger case for me. I'm thinking I need to change that.
Yeah, I mean, I have it at playable, but maybe that's a little too generous for any 9-mana card. Maybe we need to meet in the middle at meh.
Yeah, I actually kind of like your playable here. I don't think it's an exceptional thing, but I feel like green needs some ramp targets. I kind of like having one that sits right at the top of the mana curve. And I think, an 8/8 indestructible that may have some upside I think that's working for me.
Yeah, it's pretty tanky.
Yeah, I think let's put her in as a tanky playable 1X.
Love it. One last Gatherer pull, and then I think I'm done with Gatherer comments for a little while at least.
That's too bad. I love the Gatherer deep cuts.
Yeah, me too. I don't want to have them for every card, but this one I couldn't resist. Someone on Gatherer, I can't remember when this was, probably 2009 or 2010, said very proudly that this may be the best card that they own.
Aw.
Yeah, that was my exact reaction. Just, oh.
I kind of love it, though. The enthusiasm,
Yeah. I mean, it's 9 mana for an 8/8. It just reeks of power.
Yeah, and it's got this incredibly powerful ability. Any number of creatures. Yeah. That's crazy.
That's nuts.
This sees a surprising amount of EDH play, so she commands only 28 decks, which not surprising. But she appears in 2,900, which isn't too shabby for a 9-drop.
I think she kind of makes more sense in EDH, like you've got a crazier mana base, and you're probably a lot more likely to have a situation where you've got enough creatures to make this worthwhile.
A lot of card draw and ways to refill your hand.
Yeah.
All
right. Our next card is Nature's Will. 2 GG for an enchantment. It says whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, tap all lands that player controls and untap all lands you control. I'm really not sure whether this has any impact in our cube.
Yeah.
It does appear in like a pretty good number of EDH decks, about 4,300. And I could see it having some potential in that format. For us, it just felt like 4 mana is a whole lot to pay for something that has no real immediate impact and also requires some follow-up from you. Like you need to deal damage and then also have something to spend that mana on from untapping.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about tapping down your opponent's lands, it seems like it'd be really great. But I feel like a lot of the time in Kamigawa Limited, like that just doesn't really matter. It doesn't keep them tapped on your opponent's turn. It just sort of taps them down on yours.
Yeah, I read this as essentially like a weird mana doubler for you, honestly, because I think I'm with you. The tapping your opponent's lands, like it would be most useful for against counter spells, right? Like you tap down their lands and then you're safe to play things out in main phase 2. But I don't think that really matters because counter spells are just pretty bad in this block. And it doesn't really do much to say protect you against removal or combat tricks because your opponent is going to play those before combat damage is dealt. I think this is mostly about doubling your mana. And with that in mind, I think it's maybe a meh. Like the Soul Shift deck does tend to get a lot of creatures lodged in its hand. And this could be kind of a way for that deck to just keep throwing bodies at your opponent and then keep refilling and refueling. I don't know. Like that might be too cute, but I could see the Soul Shift deck utilizing this.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like even in the Soul Shift deck, especially if you're in green, then I don't know. It's a little bit like the Myojin. It's sort of imagining a scenario where you have like just so many creatures in your hand and not enough mana to play all of them. And I just don't know how often that's going to happen because this doesn't, really give you more mana than what your land could generate, right? Lets you use them again.
Well, that's true. So you can't get it all in one phase to cast like an 8-drop. That's a good point.
Right.
You could cast a 4-drop main phase 1 if you had 4 lands, and then another 4-drop main phase 2.
Yeah, which would be amazing if you had that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how often that's really going to come up.
Yeah. So where are you on this? I have it at a meh 1X.
I've got it as an insta-cut with like tentative willingness to come up to a Mea 1X just to see if it ever does work. Because like if you can get value out of this, I think it could be great. But I question how often that would really happen. And then also keeping in mind that you're spending 4 mana just to make that a possibility, right? Like playing 2 4 mana creatures on the same turn when you wouldn't otherwise have enough mana to do that sounds awesome, but you've already spent 4 mana setting up Nature's Will to make that possible.
Yeah, maybe we should just cut it. This gets into another of those scenarios of like, we want the cube to not end up as 1,500 cards, and that's going to be easier to do if we make some cuts now.
Right. Right. Make some hard decisions.
Yeah. I'm fine.
And this one's not that hard.
Yeah, it's not that hard. In part because this art is so ugly. It's funny.
Yeah.
After 18 years of playing Magic and honestly looking at Kamigawa cards more often in those 18 years than I think many players do, I don't think I've ever run across this card. I was like, I saw it on the spreadsheet and I was like, that's an ugly card I've never heard of. Oh, that's kind of cute. And I've somehow never seen it before.
Yeah. The flavor text on this actually bugs me quite a bit too. It says, without the kami to speak to nature on our behalf, we must beg help from nature directly. Seshiro, the Anointed. What bothers me about that is like that suggests that nature and the kami are two separate things.
Yes.
And sort of the story that we've been given all this time is like the kami are the embodiment of nature.
It's super frustrating.
Right?
Yes.
So like is nature this third autonomous being? Like where does nature fit in here that like the snakes are able to like go make a treaty with it that the kami are not part of?
I had that same frustration, and I also kind of felt like the art. Seshiro is a snake, and I suppose it's possible the vines in this art are helping these snake people, but it's really hard to tell. Like they're being sort of entangled, and maybe they're being launched towards the enemy, and that's their desire, or they're being suffocated by the vines. Like it's not unambiguous to me that nature is helping these snake people out.
The one on the left kind of looks like he's like screaming and being strangled by nature.
Yeah, totally. This is also another example of your the thing you've already pointed out, which is every single appearance of the Orochi, they look like completely different.
Yep. These have a real kind of Ninja Turtles vibe.
Oh, it's super Ninja Turtles-y, especially the one on the bottom right. I mean, he is a Ninja Turtle if they were snakes.
He really is.
Ninja Snake.
Yeah.
Which strangely, I don't think this block contains any Ninja Snakes. What a missed opportunity.
It really is. No ninjas in green.
As you were saying, this is a surprise EDH role player, although I realized once I dug in a little more that while this appears in 4,400 decks, almost half of those, 2,000 exactly, are in Najeela the Blade Blossom, who's a 5-color commander who can spend Wubberg to give you another combat step. And so you get an infinite combo with Nature's Will, which seems very cool.
Okay.
But that's like half of all of its appearances, basically.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. It's a pretty expensive card too.
I know it's weirdly expensive. It's like, what is it? It's like $28 in $70 in foil.
Yeah. That was a surprise to me.
Yeah, I guess it must. This feels like one they're going to slip into a mystery booster or the list or something at some point. Like that Wizards has to be eyeing that price tag and going, we can sneak this in somewhere and sell some packs.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, should we where do we fall on this? Just Instacut?
Oh yeah, let's just Instacut it. Unmourned.
All right. Let's get it out.
Not to spoil anything, but let's go to another card that may not be mourned. Orbweaver Kumo. 4 GG for a 3/4. Yes. Spirit. It's got reach. And whenever you play a Spirit or Arcane spell, it gains Forest Walk until end of turn. So 6 mana, 3/4 Reacher with conditional Forest Walk. This is, believe it or not, the biggest, baddest reach creature in the whole block. There is no creature with reach that's bigger than this. And I hate it. And I want to cut this card. It's like so disappointing.
It's disappointing and it's disgusting.
Oh, it's so gross.
The art is just so gross. It's like the Kumo. I don't know if that actually means spider. I guess I should have checked that.
I'll go work on that. Keep going.
All right. Yeah, you fact check me as usual. But like all of the Kumo spirits in Kamigawa are sort of spider-like, but they're gross. They're almost grosser than just a regular old spider because they're basically like a big sphere with a nasty orifice in the middle of it and a whole bunch of legs and other protrusions coming out in like a ring. It just looks so, and this one is like really giving you an unpleasant angle on everything. It's just
Yeah.
so nasty.
Yeah, I don't really do spiders very well. And
Yeah.
this one is like just why is it so egregiously gross?
Yeah, this is some nightmare fuel for
Why
you.
did we need this orifice?
And just 6 mana 3/4 with reach is crap.
3/4 isn't enough to matter against, well, particularly the dragons, but a lot of the crucial flyers that you really care about.
Yeah.
And also we both are on record as kind of hating land walk as just like being an unfun mechanic.
Yeah, and this doesn't even have permanent land walk.
Right.
It's only triggered by spirit crafts. I look at this card and I feel like green can do so much better than this.
Yeah, we just saw Moss Kami. Yeah.
Exactly. We just saw Moskami. We're about to see another great green card.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we don't need this.
Easy instacut.
Cut it.
Just for anyone who's wondering, Kumo is indeed the Japanese word for spider, and also Wiktionary tells me it is the old High German word for delicately. So something you can use.
That really is some top tier trivia.
This is why people tune in. Okay.
Okay. Next up, I promised a good creature, and we've got one. It's Order of the Sacred Bell, 3G for a 4/3 human monk. That's it. It's a 4 mana 4/3. Like, that is a hard rate to beat in Kamigawa, and he's only one designated mana. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about this. Just solidly playable.
Yeah, and it is a hard rate to beat, as you're saying. I did a quick check, and this is literally this and Kodama of the South Tree are literally the biggest 4-drops in the block who don't have a drawback. So while to modernize a 4-mana 4/3 vanilla looks like, wow, that's terrible, this guy really gets in and mixes it up. He wins a fight against about 63% of creatures in the block, which is great, and then he trades with another 21%. So basically, this guy tussles effectively and trades 1 for 1 or just destroys 84% of all the creatures in the whole block, which is pretty strong for just a vanilla 4-mana single designated creature.
That is pretty good. And, for that, I can accept the human monk type line here.
What is your objection to the human monk again?
Oh, dude. Remember there were all these cards like last episode where I was saying, why is this a human monk?
Oh, right. You wanted them all to be snakes.
Yeah, well, there's no, other than just sort of the flavor of there being monks in Jukai Forest, like there's no synergy or through line to all of the monks in this set. They're just sort of creatures that show up.
It's funny that Wizards hadn't invented like human tribal yet, because there's a lot of humans in this set, and it's, I feel like today they might have come up with, they had all the spirits tied together tribally, but the mortals are all kind of fighting on their own, which I think creates a lot of play problems, right? It's like in green, you got the snakes,
right,
but there's only like 12 snakes or whatever, or 20 snakes, or whatever the number is in the whole block. So the snake tribal can't really get anywhere. And you have the same problem in every single color with these tribal effects that can't really get there on the mortal side. I feel like today they would have maybe had some kind of mortal keyword, almost like ally in Zendikar or something that ties all the mortals together mechanically.
Yeah, that would have made all the human monks a little more interesting.
Yeah, I think the only thing I can say against Order of the Sacred Bell is that green's 4-drop slot is pretty stacked. We've got Kodama of the South Tree, as already mentioned. We've got Burgrafters, Sosuke coming up a little later this episode. Later in the block, Kami of the Tended Garden. There were some really good green 4-drops. That doesn't mean he won't make it. I just think it's worth noting he's got some stiff competition.
Yeah. How many should make it, you think?
I had it as a playable 2x. The number's a bit of a stab in the dark. I can't imagine cutting this. I actually, I almost feel like this is an auto-include for me, weirdly, just because I think the fact that a 4-mana 4/3, like if you go back to limited articles at the time, they all have this in like the top 3 green comments. Like this was considered a really solid card. And I almost feel like it's almost iconic to me for being so mechanically bland and yet essential.
Yeah. A little bit like Moskami.
Yeah, very like Moskami. Yeah. Let me give you one more thing that might help bump it up to auto-include, which is that I found a 2005 draft guide that called this guy Taco Bell as some kind of affectionate nickname. And I thought that was pretty great.
Oh, I love that. We're going to have to call it that from now on.
Revive that 05 slang. Get it back into circulation.
Oh, man.
So is auto-include, is that nuts? Do you want to stick to playable?
I mean, it is pretty hard to see a situation where we would actually cut this card completely. So auto-include does kind of seem right.
Okay, what about quantity?
Okay, I put
that was a
two.
pained series of noises.
It's hard for me. It's hard enough to rate these cards. It's even harder to figure out what the right number is, especially since I feel like we're going to end up with about 10,000 cards in the cube by the time we get to the end of the block.
What about, I had him at a 2, but what about just a 1? Because I feel like we could have him as a 1, and if we need another 4-drop, we put in another one. Like, all I want is to ensure there's at least one of these, and if it turns out we need 2, great. The more the merrier.
Okay, I think that's good. And I think with all the green 4-drops, we can, maybe have that attitude of, like, there are plenty of good green cards at 4. And if we need to dial it up a little, we know where to go.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And I'll also note that if you're wondering what the Sacred Bell is, it appears later. It's Junkyo, which is an artifact coming up next episode.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, let's go to, I think this is our final flip card of the set, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, next up we've got Orochi Eggwatcher, 2 and a G for a 1/1 snake shaman, and you could pay 2G and tap it to create a 1/1 green snake. And then if you control 10 or more creatures, flip it. And it flips into Shidako Brood Mistress, 3/3 snake shaman, and you could pay G and sack a creature to give target creature +3/+3 until end of turn. Whew, so that's a mouthful, like all these flip cards. So 3 mana 1/1 that you can pay 3 and tap it to make a 1/1. If you have 10 or more, it flips into a 3/3 that can sack creatures to giant growth. Okay, so for me, this just doesn't pass the smell test. Like, we're paying 6 mana to get our second 1/1 out of this thing. Like, that is just a terrible, terrible body. And I feel like I almost feel like I have to ignore the whole rest of the card just because that is such an unacceptable rate.
Okay, I mean, it is a pretty terrible rate. But if you think about it in comparison to Honden of Life's Web, which is 5 mana for no stats, that gets you a 1/1 next turn.
Yeah.
It looks a little more tolerable, right?
It's funny because I was thinking of the Honden of Life's Web, and I like that a little more because it doesn't ask anything of me after I resolve it.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that, and I like the Honden too, but like I don't know. In this set, spending 6 mana to get 2 1/1s is not as atrocious as it looks on paper. Okay, let me back this up and explain my reasoning a little bit here. I have this rated as a build around. In calling it that, I'm bending our impab system a little bit. I don't think that we build the cube around this card or think about necessarily like whether to include another card based on whether it works with this. But I can kind of imagine a certain kind of deck that wants this card. And I imagine that deck having maybe the green Zubera, the green Honden, cards that give cheap little spirits or cheap little creatures and get you up to 10 creatures to flip into Shidako here and be giant growthing all the time. I don't know if that's good, but I like that idea.
I like that idea too.
It sounds fun and like not totally unrealistic to get up to 10 creatures.
Yeah, I wonder how many, let me go look how many just token makers there are in the whole set. There's 22 cards that make some kind of token in the set. Some of which we've talked about and already cut, like Maronar, or cards like Budoka Gardener, where I wouldn't really count them. There are a couple others, like Sosuke's Summons and Betrayers, I could see getting there. So there may be a little bit of a token theme here. I'm okay with your build around rating.
Yeah, and maybe it doesn't work at all, or you never end up getting to the point where you can actually flip this because it is a 1/1. But I don't know. I kind of like the idea of having this as a weird option where if you manage to flip it, it could do some crazy stuff for you.
Yeah, okay. I'm fine with your build around rating here.
Okay.
I also think the art here is a little stronger than many of the flip cards. It's manages to pack quite a lot of detail in without being busy, which is a nice trick. And I also like that we see kind of the whole journey of the snake civilization from really freaky snake baby to young mother.
They're kind of cute.
I don't know about that. To young mother to like hilariously booba brood mistress. I think that's kind of fun that we're seeing their whole journey here.
Yeah. I like this art, but it's also sort of like funny to me, not just because of the snake babies, but just there's something about the composition of this where kind of like that red ogre flip card, the unflipped version of this is sort of like that subject is sort of shoved off to the side of the frame.
Yeah.
And then you've got the flipped version here. It looks like she's like ripping a hole in the wall and like barging into the room upside down because it's a flip card.
She's Kool-Aid Man.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she's just busting down this wall, but upside down, and this Eggwatcher is just kind of shoved off into the corner with all the babies.
Yeah, the ratio is kind of funny between the two halves of the composition, and it almost does look like they're in the same thing, and like Shidako is just popping in upside down to check on how the babies are doing.
She's just hanging out.
All right, build around 1X?
Yeah. Next up, we've got Orochi Leafcaller, G for a 1/1 Snake Shaman that has G, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So this card does make it, a lot easier to splash into another color just by itself, which green is already better at doing than every other color, obviously. But this is also part of an infinite mana combo within the block.
What?
Yes. Involving this card, Sachi, Daughter of Seshiro, who we'll talk about in this episode, and a blue card from Betrayers called Freed from the Real that allows you to freely untap or tap a creature by paying 1 blue mana.
Okay, walk us through it. How does the combo work?
Okay, so Sachi gives shamans you control the ability to tap for 2 green mana. Okay. Orochi Leafcaller allows you to spend 1 green mana to add 1 mana of any color, basically, turn a green mana into anything else. Freed from the Real allows you to untap the creature that it's enchanting for 1 blue mana. So you put Freed from the Real on Sachi. Sachi can tap for 2 green mana because she's also a shaman. You tap for 2 green mana. You use the Leafcaller to turn 1 of those green mana into a blue mana, spend that to untap Sachi, and then do it all over again.
Boom, there you go. Oh, that's cool.
I don't know what you spend all that mana on, but that is an infinite mana combo within this block. So,
oh man, yeah. There's not a lot of outlets for it, but that is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got on this card.
Okay, yeah, he's an interesting enabler. I was trying to do some digging. I'm not super confident in my Scryfall search here, but I believe this is actually the cheapest like mana filtering card in the game. Not just in terms of how much it costs to cast, but in terms of the exchange rate. There is only one other card in the game that trades 1 mana for a mana of another of any color. That's Blood Celebrant in black, weirdly, who will pay black and 1 life to do this. But of course, the 1 life there is pretty real. So this is actually the most efficient way to filter mana in all of Magic.
Wow.
That said, I'm not that impressed with him. I think the problem with the Leafcaller is he's not an accelerant, right? He's just a filler.
Right.
So you've got, Kodama's Reach and Sakura-Tribe Elder and, other cards that let you actually ramp, or is this just lets you make your mana a little bit better? I don't know if that's good enough.
Yeah, I mean, like I can see it being useful when you've gotten, you're in green and then you've gotten a little ambitious with splashing into like 2 more colors and you need all the help you can get to like have that mana fixing. But I don't know how often that's really going to come up.
Yeah, I think it's not totally irrelevant. One of the things that makes this card tough to evaluate for me is that mana fixing from land has gotten so much better since this was printed with like the fetch shock land mana base and just tons and tons of dual land cycles. But we do intend to go outside the land base for this block in order to make the mana in the cube better. But even with that, I'm not expecting it to be super easy to bridge across multiple colors. So there might be something to including this just as a way to give players a little bit of mana filtering, a little bit of an ability to assemble some cheesy decks.
Yeah, I like keeping it in for now.
Okay. Yeah, this card is funny because to me, I love it. Like I've always thought of this as kind of an iconic card. And to me, it's an example of the kind of card we've talked about a lot where it can get love in the kitchen table. It's the kind of card a lot of individual players really enjoy, but he never quite made it in Constructed. He doesn't really show up in EDH. He doesn't really show up in Cube. It's kind of bums me out that cards like this really don't have a home anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right that it just, because it doesn't actually accelerate your mana at all, it just switches it around. I think that makes it a lot harder for this to be competitive.
I did find a contemporary article where Zvi Mauschewitz, noted Magic pro of this era, published a block constructed deck list where which was like Snake Tribal for competitive block constructed. I'm not clear if he actually thought this was good, but this card figures in there as something to like get boosted by Sachi and just generally act as a little one mana role player. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Oh, this is a good point to mention because I don't think I did in the intro. In the show notes for the episode in your podcast player, you'll find a link to all the cards we're talking about today on Scryfall, so you can see the art and read along, and also links to any articles or resources we mentioned along the way. So what's your rating on this, Connor?
Well, I had it at playable, but I'm feeling more of a meh at this point. It seems like kind of an edge case that this is really going to do a whole lot for you.
Yeah, I think meh is about right. I honestly, meh is generous for me. I think if I was just being cold and harsh, I would probably go Instacut, but I have such a soft spot for this. I landed at meh.
Keep it in for the infinite mana combo.
Okay, I'm sure that's going to come up.
I'm sure that'll come together.
The other thing we didn't mention is the art here is really good.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, this might be my favorite Orochi art, actually.
Wow.
So it's a shaman-y snake person sitting on a stump doing some kind of magic. You know, there's like a, I don't know, beam magic around it. I think what I like about it is less specific things about the composition and more it's incredibly detailed and yet not photorealistic. In this way, you really got very specifically in this era of Magic, sort of pre-digital painting, very obviously painted by hand. You could see areas where the brushwork's a little bit fat, like this kind of funny little grass blade off to the left that almost, or bush of grass off to the left that almost looks like it was added late. So it's very clearly painted by hand, and yet it's incredibly detailed and technically skillful. So I think it's a really wonderfully realized piece.
Yeah, it's a good one and a lot less awkward looking than most of the snakes we're going to see.
Yeah, the snakes are just kind of across the board, you know, like Kashi-Tribe Reaver, Kashi-Tribe Elite, we've already talked about, Matsu-Tribe Decoy. Like a lot of the snakes just look pretty awkward, and it just like the artist wasn't really confident in how to realize the art.
Yeah, I got more to say on that for our next snake.
Yeah, me too. That one's not great. So meh, and what about quantity?
2?
Sure. 2 seems fine. I think there's a chance this gets cut, but you know, that's what mez are for. Cards that may or may not make it.
Yep.
All right. Another snake, Orochi Ranger. 1 and a G for a 2/1. Snake Warrior. And it has the signature Orochi ability. Whenever Orochi Ranger deals combat damage to a creature, tap that creature, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Ooh, this card is hard to get excited about. You know, all of the snakes feel like they should have Death Touch, but this snake really, really should have Death Touch. And it wouldn't even be that powerful with Death Touch. It would just become adequate at that point. Like, green gets 2 drops with Death Touch. Like, why can't Orochi Ranger just get the thing at obvious? It's like you compare it to Ambush Viper, right? The iconic Death Touching green 2-drop, and this thing just looks so miserable.
Yeah. Also another snake. Like, there's the precedent. You've got a 2-mana snake with Death Touch.
I know. Well, this precedes Ambush Viper, right? I hope so.
Oh yeah, you're probably right.
That would have been funny actually if Ambush Viper had come later. I wish they'd printed some of the earlier snakes, but as kind of humanoid snakes in the set. That would have been pretty hilarious. Like some old snake getting reprinted, but with totally different interpretation of the art.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's Innistrad, so definitely after this.
Man, you want to talk about some better art? That Ambush Viper art is pretty great.
It's definitely a Viper.
It's definitely better than this art, right, Connor?
Yeah. This is not quite my least favorite snake. That's the next snake. This is maybe my second least favorite.
Oh, really? I think this is much worse than the Sustainer.
This is okay. There's just so much about this art that bothers me. Like the Matsu-Tribe Decoy, this is a snake running through trees or up in a tree, which is fine. That seems to be a common theme among the Orochi. Now that I'm looking through all of them, a lot of them are in trees.
They're all in trees.
Pretty much, yeah. Even the Leafcaller sitting on a stump.
Or next to trees, in the case of the Decoy.
There's trees somewhere.
Yeah.
There are a few kind of design commonalities that we see in all the snakes. They've all got 4 arms. All of them except Matsu-Tribe Decoy have 3 fingers on each hand. 2 toes on their feet.
Really, really tiny waists.
Really tiny waists. They're super skinny. They have a snake-like face, obviously.
Inexplicably long hair in a lot of cases.
Very, very long hair. They have extravagant hair. Very long limbs for a creature that's based on an animal with no limbs. But like between all these different snakes, there are so many variations in how the artists have interpreted them. They have very different, like, not just skin tones, but skin textures. Their heads are all shaped a little bit differently and are like varying degrees of snakiness. Like this ranger has like basically a very small snake head
Yeah,
stuck on top of
a
her
snake head
shoulders.
that's like half the size of what you would
Yeah,
expect it to be.
like this tiny little snake head just grafted onto basically a human body with more arms.
Yeah, and if you contrast that with like Shisato Whispering Hunter, who we'll get to later, like her head is gigantic. Like there's just so little consistency. Or Matsu-Tribe Sniper or Matsu-Tribe Decoy, like almost every snake, now that you mentioned this, their head looks different. Like there's no consistency. It's kind of maddening.
Yeah, like snake to snake, they're totally different looking creatures.
Yeah, and I get, I'll sometimes complain about like modern sets having too strict of art direction, although they've eased up on this lately, and like too much adherence to kind of a Bible of design. But this shows that you can go too far the other way of like, there's so little visual consistency among these cards that is actually jarring.
Yeah. Also, this one, not just like the appearance of this snake warrior, but like all the other technical aspects of the art too really bother me. Like we've got this attempt at a dynamic angle and a pose, but the angle feels really weird and the like foreshortening of the leg seems too dramatic and like too much. You've got this gigantic foot and tiny little head at the top. The arms all look really stiff and awkward, and this ranger has no idea what she's doing with any of her arms. Like one of them is brandishing a knife and the others are just kind of
They're just kind of out. Like for a ranger, she's really doesn't seem to be controlling her body very precisely.
I mean, the two lower arms, I would describe the gesture that those arms are making as, what are we doing here?
To me, it's more kind of like, yo, brah, what's up? That's kind of more the vibe I get.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, also her left arm looks about, 10 inches longer than her right arm.
Yeah. Oh, wow, you're right.
Yeah, there's some awkward kind of foreshortening perspective stuff happening here.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of the snake artists kind of struggled figuring out what to do with all of these limbs, like with the Matsu-Tribe Decoy firing a bow and also drawing a katana at the same time. It's like we've got four arms and they've all got to be doing something. The Leafcaller does that really well.
Yeah.
Casting the spell. And then here we've got the ranger just kind of grasping for meaning.
Yeah. I had this at a mad 2x. I don't really know why, except that I was like, I don't know, it's moderately playable 2-drop, but that might be too generous. I keep thinking about all the snake tribal. We haven't gotten to them any yet, but there's a number of cards in this set that want you to be in snake tribal. And I feel like we're going to need some number of cheap snakes, although you may be about to tell me that the Leafcaller who precedes this and the Sustainer who follows it are just better options.
I think both of those are true.
And Sakura-Tribe Elder. All right. Let's just cut this, Connor.
Yeah, get it out.
Okay, insta-cut.
Okay, going from one ugly snake to another one, we've got Orochi Sustainer. 1G for a 1/2 snake shaman. With tap, add G to your mana pool. So this is a more expensive Llanowar Elves with one more toughness, and it's a snake. It's a pretty unfortunate comparison for the Sustainer. But I think here it offers just enough ramp to be kind of meaningful in green, even though it's obviously strictly worse than Llanowar Elves. Like getting the green mana here is enough.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's tough to love Sustainer for me when this set contains like two of the most iconic ramp cards of all time, right? We got Sakura-Tribe Elder coming up. We had Kodama's Reach, I think last episode. So like that doesn't quite make the grade. 2-mana dorks are not as good as 1-mana dorks. They're not even close to as good as 1-mana dorks. So I don't know. I think this is still includable, but I think it's far, far worse than a 1-mana elf or than other ramp options, even in the same set.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's talk about this art for a minute, because I think we differ a little bit on that.
We do? I think the art is fine. I have no feelings about the art either way, except that it continues our pattern of literally every single Orochi looking different in their anatomy and basic structure.
Yep.
And a startling number of the Orochi have, large prominent breasts, which is not something you immediately associate with snake people. Yep. At least I don't.
Well, this one's also wearing a loincloth kind of thong.
Yeah, like a halter top kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep. I hate everything about this art. I hate that it doesn't
Why?
look like a snake. Well, when I first saw it, so the pose that this snake woman is in is she's kind of got two hands, because remember there's always four arms. She's got two hands on tree trunk, two hands up in the air doing some sustaining, I assume. And then you see her body like going down. You see her body going like down toward the tree trunk. She's sort of like propping herself up. And
She's
I
like
thought,
almost,
just
but not quite leaning on it. It's weird.
yes, for years I thought that that was like a solid snake body, because you can't tell that she has two legs. At
Me
least
too,
at
until
first
this very
glance.
moment.
And then you realize, no, though she does have two separate legs. She's just in an extremely awkward pose where she's like leaning
To
sideways.
show off her sexy snake body, I think.
Yeah, to show off her sexy snake thigh, leaning against this tree trunk and then like twisting to make sure you see her snake cleavage.
It's another one where she's in a tree, but doesn't really look like she's in a tree. Like we saw it
Yes.
with the Orochi Ranger. We saw it with, who did we see it with? Matsu-Tribe Decoy.
Mm-hmm.
Like she doesn't look like she's standing on it. She looks like she's just standing on the ground.
Yeah,
Like you couldn't strike this pose on a tree.
right. Like either standing on the ground or possibly like holding herself up with these two spindly snake arms in a
Yeah, but they're not. They
like
don't
a,
look like they're working at all. They're
right.
very. They don't look engaged.
Yeah, you see what like the whole thing is just really awkward.
Yeah,
It's a yikes.
it is a yikes. I also don't really like the flavor text, or I don't like it, but it makes me question her. So her flavor text is nothing is the same anymore. The forests are not as lush. The water is not as pure. The air not as clear. Without the kami to direct and sustain the forces of nature, it is only a matter of time before we feel their neglect. Now, I feel like this makes her loyalty to the mortal world pretty suspect. I don't really feel like that's kind of a full-throated defense of the mortal cause. That sounds like she's missing the kami a little bit too much.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I want to see the mortals stand up for themselves.
Well, it's confusing too, because it's saying it's only a matter of time before we feel their neglect, but the kami aren't really neglecting the mortal world, they're attacking it.
Yeah, it's true.
This makes it sound like they just sort of all, got up and left.
I admire her working to sustain it despite those obstacles, though. That's admirable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like she's doing a very good job, but
No. Well, she was born, if she'd been born as a one mana creature, she would have been better at it. What about playability? So I have this at a meh 2x because it's kind of like, it's fine. It fills a spot. It doesn't excite me. I don't think it's particularly good either.
I had it as a 3x playable. I think I think it is kind of playable, but 3 is probably too many.
Yeah, I mean, not to pull back the veil here, but you have Sakura-Tribe Elder at a 2x and this at a 3x.
What?
I find that hard to explain.
Are you sure?
I'm 100% sure.
All right, I'm gonna
looking at it right now.
I'm gonna switch those right now.
Okay.
2x Sakura-Tribe Elder 3. There you go.
All right. Whew. All right. That's good.
Just errata that.
Yeah, I'm fine with 2x for sure. I don't really care between playable and meh. I think it's on the board. I do care. I think it is a meh. To me, playable are cards that are like clearly going to make the grade, clearly going to make your deck most of the time, and I don't really think the Sustainer hits that bar.
No, you think you'd pass on her most of the time?
I don't know about most. Let's see. Where does she? I guess she's not the 23rd card. She's more, but she's like the 19th card in a deck. You know what I mean? She's not the 10th.
Yeah.
She's not like I'm never cutting this.
Yeah, that's kind of a meta range, I suppose.
Yeah, she's somewhere between meh and playable. I'm gonna let you make the call. You read her out. You make the call.
Well, I feel like we need to be more cruel to these cards than we have been. So
Here.
let's go with meh.
Especially these snake people with poor art.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to Rootrunner. 2 GG for a 3/3 spirit. GG sack it. Put target land on top of its owner's library. And Soul Shift 3. So it's a mini plow under hill giant Soul Shifter. I love this card. For some reason, my notes say poster child meh card, but my rating says playable, so I'm not sure what's going on.
I saw that immediately.
I think this is a poster child playable card for a bunch of reasons. One, because I love land destruction and I love annoying your opponent by interfering with their mana. If you've never been plow undered or otherwise had a land put on top of your deck or a card put on top of your deck, it's easy to underestimate how painful that is. But like mid to late game, that is really, really annoying to be denied a draw step, be slightly down on mana. It's really, really irritating.
definitely one of those mechanics where when we started out, like as a new player, it sounds like, oh man, I'm just putting it on their library so they get it right back.
Yeah.
You read it, and at first, as a new player for me, it was like, that doesn't seem good. I want to just destroy it or exile it or something. But once you actually play this effect, you realize how painful it is for your opponent.
Yeah, a lot of times I think it's actually a little bit better than destroying the land. Or at
Yeah.
least late game it is. Like this essentially denies your opponent a draw step, which is pretty solid when you get into one of those top deck battles late game. And of course, like so many of these cards, it is better with damage on the stack, right? Like this puts 3 damage on the stack and then denies your opponent a draw step. And then it maybe gets you a card back from your graveyard. That's like a 2 for 1, a 3 for 1. I don't even know how many for 1 that is. That's a lot of value.
That is a lot of value. So this seems like a perfectly reasonable card to me, power wise, but I was kind of thinking it would still be perfectly reasonable if you didn't have to pay the 2 mana for Plowing Under. What do you think about that? If it was just free, just sack him.
I think it wouldn't be overpowered for sure. Like certainly in the modern context. Right. I do think it would be pretty annoying. You know, it would just be like with damage on the stack. I think it would really put your opponent in an awkward spot because 3/3 just trades up with so many things or trades well with so many things. You know, I feel like you would just end up in a lot of situations where your opponent really has no way to play around it. They're just gonna get 3 for 1 without any agency. What do you think of the art here? I love this art. It's like very fairy tale to me. It's like a little spooky without being over the top gross or scary. It's just like weird and unnerving. I really, really like this piece.
Maybe I'm just biased by the name Rootrunner, but I feel like this has a lot of movement to it.
Yeah.
Like there's the foreground has this kind of branch, so it looks like you're, you know, kind of peering between a couple of branches at this spirit that's racing through the canopy or something.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really see a form very clearly. There's, you know, some arms and legs and kind of this mass on top, but you don't get a very clear sense of what this thing's actual shape is, which I think is pretty effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very kind of Spirited Away, which
Yeah.
is true of a decent number of arts in this set, but this one is really, really strong Spirited Away vibes for me.
Yeah.
I've never heard of Adam Rex, but I'm scrolling through his Scryfall, and he's got a decent number of just kind of solid, realistic pieces, but it looks like when they've let him get abstract, he does some really weird, interesting stuff. Like he did Horde of Notions, his Igneous Golem art from Mirage, which I don't blame anyone for not knowing what that is. I didn't know about it till this minute, but it's a really cool abstract piece. I'm sending you a picture, Connor. His Infinite Hourglass is cool. He's got a lot of kind of cool, quirky abstract pieces.
Whoa, that Igneous Golem. Pretty
it's
freaky.
Cool, right?
It is cool, though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and he's got a lot of kind of quirky pieces like that. So, you know, props to Adam Rex. I just learned about a cool new Magic artist, which is always great. Where do you land on this? So I have it as a playable, as I said. I think Met, I don't know why I would even flirt with Met. I think this is a very solid playable. And I have it as a 2X mostly because I like Plow Under effects.
Yeah, I've got it playable. Also, I had it as a 1 because we do, you know, 4 mana is a pretty crowded spot. I'm not sure this is the card we want 2 of.
That's true. There are a lot of 4 mana guys. Well, how many 4 mana Soul Shifters are there?
Good question.
Let's take a look. Bergrafter, who we loved.
Mm-hmm.
Gibbering Kami, who we also loved. And then there's a handful of other less good ones in later sets. So I'd say, yeah, this and this has competition from 2 other really solid 4-drop Soul Shifters.
Yeah, I mean, just in green too. You know, you've got the Kodama, the South Tree, Bergrafter.
Yeah, you got lots of green 4-drops. You're right. Sachi, we got Sosuke coming up. There's a lot of really solid 4-drops in green. It's over
Feral Deceiver.
It's like 5 is kind of Feral. Yes, Feral Deceiver is also a card in green.
So
that you somehow persuaded me to include.
Yep, I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So how many Rootrunners does that leave us room for?
I still want to say 2, but we can start with 1, I guess. Okay, let's negotiate. Let me call it an auto-include, and we can go to 1.
Oh.
No?
Okay.
No?
Well, I have a counter offer. This is what I thought you were going to propose.
Okay.
I thought you were going to propose we have 1, but if and when we cut Feral Deceiver, we replace it with a Rootrunner.
Yes.
I could agree to that.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that, but I still kind of want it as an auto-include because it's my favorite. I think it might be one of my favorite arts in the set the more I look at it.
Wow. Let's just a reminder to the listeners, Austin's first sentence in his notes for this card was poster child Matt card. Now it's an auto include.
The notes are looking a little loose today, aren't they? We're making some gross errors.
They're pretty confusing. Okay, all right. We can do auto include 1.
Okay, 1 auto include. All right. Before we move on, though, I want to share a really good long comment from somebody named Mode on Gatherer. The highlight of it is this makes for an interesting soft lock with a card called Gift of Immortality, which, if you're not familiar with it, I wasn't. That's a 2 and a W enchantment aura from the original Theros block. It enchants a creature. And it says, when enchanted creature dies, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Return Gift of Immortality to the battlefield attached to that creature at the beginning of your next end step. So you throw a Gift of Immortality on this, and basically your opponent never gets another draw step. And I think that's pretty awesome for 2 underwhelming, somewhat forgotten cards.
Wow. You gotta wonder how someone comes up with a combo like that. Like, did they just kind of drop some cards on the floor and these ended up right next to each other?
Yeah. I'm sure
He just dropped his collection.
So the great part is, Connor, I've only started reading his comment. I'm going to read the rest of it. I'll quickly define the cards as we go through. But he went super deep. I want to go build this deck he's talking about because it's hilarious. So he goes on to say, and both go well with Tallow Wisp, which again, if you don't know, is a Betrayers of Kamigawa card that has a Spiritcraft trigger. So when you play a Spirit or Arcane spell, you can search your library for an aura and put it into your hand. So you get your Tallow Wisp to get you your Gift of Immortality to put onto your Rootrunner.
Yeah.
It becomes even better with Eidolon of Blossoms, which is a classic Enchantress effect. You know, play an enchantment, draw a card. And the Eidolon of Blossoms is a spirit. Which, okay, so he points out that's 3 layers of card advantage. Reverse cantrip for your opponent, who will keep redrawing the same land. You can return a spirit card, and you draw a card every time this happens. Then he points out Hanakami, with the sacking ability, works with the gift as well and lets you get back these cards. And then he just keeps going from there. I'll let you all look it up if you want, but I really shout out to Mode for going this deep on this card.
Wow. Mode, if you're listening, please send a diagram.
Please send a diagram, and we will send you Rootrunners in the mail.
And maybe also a Graxaplon.
And yes, we have many foil Graxaplons. So anyone who wants one, I'm completely serious. Send us an email and I will mail you a Graxaplon and a clock spinning sticker. Okay, auto include 1x, right?
Yes.
Okay. You want to take it away? That's got to be the longest discussion of Rootrunner ever recorded by anyone except maybe Mode.
Mode has put even more thought into this than we have. Okay, let's go back to the snakes for a little while. We've got Sachi, daughter of Seshiro. 2 GG for a 1/3 legendary snake shaman. Other snakes you control get +0/+1. Shamans you control have tap add GG to your mana pool. This seemed like a classic build around to me for this set. And it's not a cheaty build around like the Orochi Eggwatcher build around we talked about earlier. This is like actually a card where you would potentially pick it and then keep an eye out for snakes in the rest of the draft. I'm not saying that Sachi is like making a snake deck,
so they can get +0/+1.
But this is a card where you will be looking for other snakes and other shamans, which there are a surprising number of in this set. So we've seen a decent number of snakes so far. The +1 or +0/+1 is pretty sad, but this shaman buff I think is pretty real. There's 32 shamans in the block. Interestingly, they're exclusively in red, black, and green, which I guess kind of flavor-wise, for some reason, makes sense to me. 9 of those 32 shamans, not including Sachi, are green, and 8 of those 9 green shamans are snakes. So you've got double synergy on those snake shamans that are getting +0/+1.
Including both Orochi Sustainer and Sakura-Tribe Elder. So you got 2 relevant 2-drop mana dorks who get more dorky, more powerful dorky.
Right there. And get this double green tap. And as I pointed out with Orochi Leafcaller, this is part of an infinite mana combo What more could you want from a 4-mana 1/3?
Okay, yeah.
So really, I feel like I'm talking myself up to an auto include on this one with, with
Yeah,
that combo.
Clearly. I'm less high on this. I had it as a meh. I'm fine with it as a build around too. As you say, like Snake and Shaman Tribal are both more real in this block than you would think. So that does help her a little bit. I hate the art here. Like I hate much of the Orochi art. I think this one is like extra goofy looking. We got another busty Snake. We got another card where I feel like the four arms don't really marry together. Like I don't there's something in the way except for Sakura-Tribe Elder, who we're gonna get to next. Like a lot of these, I feel like they're doing different things with their different sets of arms in a way that doesn't suggest any kind of like physical connection between the arms. You know what I mean? It's like they're two independent sets of arms instead of being sort of biodynamically related. Does this make any sense?
Yeah, totally. I think I said something similar earlier, maybe last episode, that it feels like a lot of these artists didn't know what to do with this many limbs.
Yeah, so in this one, it's like, what are two generic shaman-y poses? Putting your hands in a prayer kind of posture and spreading your arms. Oh, we can do both. It's like, yeah, I mean, you could. This also falls afoul of your symmetry thing. This is
sure
super
does.
symmetrical art.
It's interesting. She is like slightly set off to the right here.
I know. So what is with that?
Centered.
It's even worse.
No, I actually kind of like that because
it's so unsettling.
It makes your eye not immediately go, too symmetrical. At least my eye.
Yeah, maybe.
But it is extremely symmetrical.
She commands just 125 EDH decks, but she appears in 1300, and that high-ish number is true of a lot of these snakes. Even our Orochi Sustainer appears in 1,000 EDH decks. Like there must just be a lot of people out there who like the idea of a snake deck. That's the only explanation I can think of. She's kind of fun with a couple of obscure other shamans, like Bosk Banneret, who's a shaman who reduces the cost of your shaman spells by 1. And Centaur Omen Reader, which is a weird future sight shaman that decreases the cost of things by 2. Anyway, I'm kind of tickled that there's some bad shaman deck in EDH that's running her with a bunch of other bad shamans. I think that's kind of cute.
Yeah, cute enough to merit a build around.
Yeah, sure. It feels like a 1X for sure. I don't know if you want to somehow argue for more.
No, I think 1's right.
Okay, one more cute interaction before we move off this is Thornbite Staff from Lorwyn, which is a Lorwyn tribal artifact, tribal being a sort of failed experiment where they gave creature types to non-creature spells. And so Thornbite Staff is a artifact shaman, and so she allows that to tap for mana. And, that's kind of cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, so, just think about that a little bit.
A lot of synergy with this card.
A lot of synergies. All right, let's go from EDH slight role player to a all-time EDH all-star, Sakura-Tribe Elder. 1 energy for a 1/1 Snake Shaman. Sack it. Search your library for a basic land. Put that card into play tapped. Then shuffle. All right, we all know Sakura-Tribe Elder or Steve. He does everything. He's got graveyard synergy. He's a chump blocker. He's a mana fixer. He's take a shot for this, better with damage on the stack. And he's got dope art. This has been reprinted like 17 times, and 13 of them are with this art, which is not something you can say for many Kamigawa cards, either getting played a lot or getting their original art reused. But this one has been used a bunch, I think, because it's amazing. I think this is absolutely the best of the Orochi. It's freaky in a way that I think a 4-armed snake guy should be freaky. It's realistic and pretty convincingly rendered. He's got 2 staves, which is a great reason to have 4 arms, so you can carry 2 staves at once. I mean, I love this dude. This guy's great.
Okay, I might take some heat for this, but I do not like this art.
Oh, what? You're taking heat from me. Justify this. What? How can you not like this art?
To me, it looks so. Just for if you somehow don't know what this art looks like, he's a snake man holding 2 staves. He's using his 2 like top arms to hold one, and then his 2 bottom arms to hold another identical staff.
Connor, he's never falling over.
He's never going to fall over.
So stable.
Because he's like walking everywhere with these 2 staves, like those hiking poles, but he's using all 4 of his arms to use them. My problem with this art is it looks like one set of his arms was just copy pasted from the other set.
Uh-huh.
Or like his back arms were just glued on doing the exact same thing as the other arms. I find it really off-putting.
So it does look a little bit like children in a trench coat in that old like cartoon gag.
Yes.
It doesn't really look like one person. It looks like two people and then a head sticking out from that.
Yes. Two people with a burlap sack and then a snake head on top.
But I think that also makes him snakier in a way a lot of these aren't, because it makes him look kind of long. You know, a lot of the rest of them are just literally a person, but with an extra set of arms, whereas he's kind of long and creepy looking, you know? I don't know, maybe?
I don't think he is long and creepy looking. I mean, he is creepy looking.
How about his musculature?
What about it?
How about his well-realized biceps?
I thought he was an elder. Why is he so ripped?
He's a spiritual elder, Connor. He doesn't have to be an old man.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's fine. It doesn't.
Okay, what about the card? What about the card?
Yes, the card is great, and he's a shaman. So Sachi synergy.
Wow, your take on Sakura-Tribe Elder is Sachi synergy?
I mean, what can I add about this card that hasn't already been said? Of course, he's going to be in the queue. He's an auto include.
Yeah, okay, we agree on that. He is, I think, what is he the most played CHK Champions card in EDH?
I think so. And he might be in Cube also.
Maybe after Kodama. I think Kodama's Reach gets a little more play, right?
Maybe.
But they're both like way up there. This appears in 153,000 decks on EDH Rec, which is like 1 out of every 4, which is astonishing. And if anything, he's even more of a cube all-star. He appears in 29% of all cubes, which I think makes sense. Like this card in EDH is like a nice ramper, but in cube, like this kind of like flexibility and synergy and like he really encourages kind of layered interactions. You know, it's like if you got graveyard synergies, he gets a little bit better. If you got landfall synergies, he gets a little bit better. I think one of the reasons I love this card so much is he doesn't look like much, apparently, according to Connor, from an art perspective, but more importantly, from a mechanical perspective. He doesn't have 17 lines in his rules text. He's got basically one very simple ability, but he leads to complex emergent play, and that's one of the things I really like in Magic.
That's a good way to put it. He is slightly beat by Kodama's Reach in EDH.
How much does that get played?
That is in 35%.
Wow, so he gets massively beat. That's astonishing.
206,000.
Wow. Makes you think about how many Kodama's Reaches are in the world. It must be tens of millions.
Yeah.
I find it a little funny this guy's never gotten like a functional reprint with a more neutral flavor. Like it's such a basic kind of core design. Like I feel like it might be a little too good-ish for standard today. I don't know what it is exactly, but I'm amazed we've never gotten a like land dying man for 2 mana 1/1. That just...
I mean, the name's right there.
Land dying man.
Land dying man.
Land dyingsman. Lando McDyingsman.
Creature human dyingman.
Okay. One other weird thing about this card before we get to how many we're going to include is I looked a bit on the web for like old results, and I cannot find almost any contemporary references to this card. Like people don't talk about it much for limited.
Now that is weird,
isn't it? It doesn't show up in deck lists, and I think it's like his rise to fame must be an EDH thing. I think before EDH he didn't.
I think so.
Yeah, as far as I could tell, anyway.
Yeah, I think EDH is where he took off.
If you have a copy of Sakura-Tribe Elder at home, and I'm sure you do, take him out, give him a little smooch. He deserves it. How many do you want, Connor? You kind of nodded at 3 earlier. Is that where you are? 3?
Yeah, I errated my 2x here to a 3x.
Auto include 3x. Boom.
Yep. Okay, our next card is not actually a snake, but it's definitely snake themed. Serpent Skin, 2G for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature has flash. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and you can pay G to regenerate enchanted creature. So it's hard for me to get excited about this card, but I think it does have some place as like a cool combat trick and a way to really annoy your opponent. I still don't love it, and I don't love the art. Like it's just a hard one for me to get excited about, but I think it should be in the queue.
Huh. See, I got pretty excited about this because I think it's actually just like, I think it's good. So it's like, it's got flash, so you got that flexibility. It gives a little bit of a power toughness boost, so it can let you win a combat. I like that it boosts both power and toughness, which doesn't feel like a surefire thing in Kamigawa. And it saves your best dude, and it lets you repeatedly save your best dude. Like, I feel like you throw this on like a Moss Kami or one of your dragons, and your opponent's options just get really limited. Like, there's not a lot of removal in this format. Most of the removal that does exist relies on destroy effects. So I feel like this is actually secretly a pretty dang good card.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of it on a Moss Kami.
Don't you? Yeah, it's like you're never getting through my land dragon now.
I think the reason I can't get that excited for it is it just it doesn't read like an interesting card. It's just flash +1/+1 regenerate. Putting all of those things together probably works out to a card that is going to actually win you games, but it just doesn't read as very sexy.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't read as like a tremendously powerful card, but I think it's going to surprise us with its playability.
Yeah.
I think it's secretly pretty decent.
Okay. How many do you want?
I think one. I think this is a one of effect for sure.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
It's not that splashy or anything. It's not. I don't think it's anyone's favorite card.
No.
I also find the art here pretty awkward, which is a slight sting against it. Like there's no background. It's got like a featureless background. The guy is actually pretty well rendered. It's very realistic, and yet he is kind of snaky. Honestly, he's more snaky than a lot of the Orochi. But it's just something about the like blank background and like the way he's positioned kind of low in the canvas. It's just, I don't know. It's very bland.
Yeah, the art's like the card. It's hard for me to have very strong feelings about it. Looking at this, I found another green 3-mana skin-related card in Saviors of Kamigawa that also regenerates a creature.
Huh.
It's called Molting Skin.
Uh-huh.
So it's 2G for an enchantment, and you can bounce it to your hand to regen any creature.
Huh.
So that's another interesting skin-related regen enchantment take. That's also great and also costs 3 mana.
And also kind of recursive. Oh man, that's some freaky art on Molting Skin.
Yeah, I don't like that art.
That's really strange to have 2 3-mana regeneration auras in the same block in the same color. That seems like a really strange decision.
Right?
I think we should get this one in and we'll see if Molting Skin can also make the cut. If we have that much design space for weird regenerating things.
Yeah, between those two, I think. I mean, Molting Skin is kind of more interesting to me, but I think that this is a card that you're going to be happier to have in a lot more situations.
Yeah, I guess it is nice that Molting Skin doesn't cost any mana to activate, and it can target anything. That seems like it'd be really annoying.
Yeah, you just kind of have it out there.
Yeah, just sit out there. I don't know, playable or mad? Do you feel like my playable is extreme?
No, I think playable is fine.
1x.
All right.
Let's go to Seshiro, the Annointed. 4GG for a 3/4 legendary snake monk. I don't know why it's not a shaman. Other snakes you control get +2/+2. And whenever a snake you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. There is a startling amount of snake tribal in this set. There are like 4 snake tribal cards in Champions of Kamigawa alone. Plus, I think another 1 or 2 in Saviors and Betrayers. So much so that I would actually call snakes the second most viable tribal thing in this block after spirits. I feel like none of the other mortal races have as strong tribal synergy cards as snakes do. I think this is a distant second to Sosuke, who we'll talk about in a bit, who is just the nuts. But that doesn't mean he's not great. Like +2/+2 is just a stupidly large bonus, especially in this block. Like I think that if you have more than 2 or 3 other snakes, that's basically like an I win button, which is pretty good. It's what you want in a 6-drop. And then the fact that it lets him draw cards, so your opponent really can't just let him through either, is nice. So yeah, I think Seshiro's solid. I think the 6 mana is, for a 3/4, is a pretty significant downside, but I still think he's pretty dang good.
The 6 mana thing is pretty painful, and something I was thinking about is if you don't have any snake, like I think if you have one other snake, then that's kind of almost good enough by itself.
Yeah,
but if
true.
you don't have any other snake and it's just Seshiro, he is far worse than Masakami. It's just a 6 mana 3/4.
Yeah. He's if you don't have any other snake, he's basically bad. But you're right. I think even if you have like a Leafcaller, it's like for 6 mana you get 2 3/4s. That's totally reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that +2/+2 buff, like it's not often you see like a Lord effect like that. That's just +2/+2.
Yeah, that's stupid big.
Yeah. So I feel like if we want snakes to have a presence in the cube, which we do, and we've seen a lot of them, then I think we got to have Seshiro in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. His art, I have mixed feelings about. It's yet another example of every snake looking totally different.
And being in trees. Sort of in trees.
He's another snake with inexplicably long hair, but I actually think in a lot of ways it's better than the other snakes. Like he's using his 4 arms to fire 2 bows at once, which, that's
completely opposite directions.
Yeah, and one straight up into the air, one straight down to the ground,
And he's looking straight ahead.
Yeah,
so he's not
actually
looking
where it's going at all. That's a good point.
Yeah.
It also kind of looks like he's about to hit the branch that's like 3 feet underneath him and just knock the wind out of himself completely.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's some awkward things, but I still think he looks pretty cool. His head looks totally different than every other snake, as is tradition.
It's very snake-like, though.
He's pretty snake-like. It's also very orange. This has got to be one of the orangest green cards in all of Magic, which I don't mind. It's just kind of, it's very noticeable when you scroll through the spoiler. And it's like green art, green art, green art, green art, orange, like super orange, like a pumpkin.
You know, honestly, what the background reminds me of is Donkey Kong Country.
Oh my gosh, the whole thing is Donkey Kong Country. You're totally right.
It
started playing in my head as soon as you said it. That like do 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 do.
Yep, you could kind of imagine him making like the Kremlin dying sound, like when you jump on one of them. Oh. All right, there's a couple of other awkward things I want to point out about this art.
Okay.
Aside from the one bow aiming up, straight up, the other aiming straight down, and him looking straight ahead. Take a look at his. Let me see his right leg.
Yeah.
Is that his loincloth that's like wrapped itself twice around his shin?
Yeah, for some reason he's got like an 8-foot long loincloth, which doesn't seem very practical.
And it's like intertwined with his leg.
Well, and even when he's walking around, it would be like trailing around on the ground behind him like a wedding dress. That does seem a little awkward now you mention it.
Yeah, so I am concerned for him. Even if he does manage to grab one of these branches, he's going to trip as soon as he gets there.
And he doesn't have any arms free.
Nope.
Maybe that's why he's got his fangs bared. He's going to grab the branch with his teeth.
Oh, that hurts to think about.
It does. It would be painful.
Yeah, a lot to think about here.
A lot to think about. He commands 192 decks, which isn't bad for a really pretty bad card. So well done to you, Seshiro.
Okay, so where do we land on this?
I see you have a build around, and I like that better than what I had.
Because I mean, without other snakes, he's not good.
Terrible. Really bad.
All right, build around 1x.
Sounds good.
Okay, yet another snake. Shisato Whispering Hunter. 3G for a 2/2 legendary snake warrior. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a snake. Whenever Shisato deals combat damage to a player, that player skips their next untap step. This one is a big yikes for me. I really dislike this art. I really dislike a 4-mana 2/2. I really dislike the snake sacrifice effect, at least within the context of a cube.
Why would I want to sacrifice them?
You have to.
No, I know. I'm saying it. I'm trying to get snakes. That's the whole point.
Trying to make a snake deck, not get snakes so I can kill them.
I do think the ability is cool, right? The second ability is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the white spirit dragon ability without the tapping part. I mean, that's definitely powerful, but she doesn't have any kind of evasion or anything to, guarantee that you're going to benefit from that.
No, she's got to be the one to connect personally. It's not like she says any snake. And so you've got a bunch of snakes, a dwindling army of snakes.
Yeah, you don't got a bunch of snakes.
You don't got a bunch of snakes. You swing in, your opponent says, "Oh, I'll block the 2/2 with my literally any creature," and then you go, "Oh, okay. I wish I hadn't 2-for-1 myself."
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard for me to imagine any other outcome here.
You mentioned Yosei, and I do want to say I was looking for contemporary references to this card. I couldn't find almost any, except I found a Blogspot blog from 2004 that has one post on the entire blog. It is in Russian, and it is about a Shisato Whispering Hunter plus Yosei green-white control deck.
Uh-huh.
And so I will let Google Translate describe how the deck works, and I'll link it in the show notes because I think this guy deserves some traffic. So he says, idea, tap the enemy everything, Yosei him, and then Shisato Whispering Hunter, she not give untap steps and kick slowly. Again, this is Google Translate's fault. And bypass blockers with Blinding Beam, bonus points. On the 4th or 5th turn, with the help of Talismans and Sakuras, we lay out Yosei. On the next move, we kick, tap 5 permanents, and sacrifice under Altar of Bone or Diabolic Intent. We are looking for the missing comrade or Shisato, and away we go. So props to that. I appreciate the green-white snake tribal deny all your untap steps deck. I think that's pretty great.
Wow.
This deck doesn't include any land. It just leaves that to the reader's imagination. Now that I look at it, it just lists the spells, which I think is kind of wonderful too.
I mean, that's the important part, right?
Yeah. You mentioned you hate this art. I hate this art too. It's by an artist called John Bolton. I assume that is not the John Bolton who was Donald Trump's national security advisor for a year, but you never know.
You never know.
John only illustrated 11 cards, and this is pretty weird. 7 of them were in Mirage, and 4 of them were in Champions of Kamigawa. And that was his entire oeuvre, and I just think that's really strange.
That is pretty weird.
This is an Instacut, though, right?
Yeah. Get her out of here.
All right. She commands 22 decks, which I think is generous, if anything.
Oh, I'm surprised it's any.
One more thing in defense of John Bolton before we move on. He did do his other 3 pieces in this set were Hirobi, Kanda, and Uyo. And that's a pretty decent hit rate.
Wow. So he got all legends.
He got all legends, and I think most... Honestly, I don't hate this art quite as much as you do. I hate her face. I hate looking at her face, but I think...
That's the part I can't get over.
But don't you think, like, on a technical level, it's pretty good? Like, she's freaky in a way I think a snake person should be. The background is well realized. She looks pretty serpentine compared to most of them. Like, I think it's pretty well done. It's just unpleasant.
Well, it's... I'm glad you mentioned that he also did Hirobi, because this has a similar kind of background to me.
Like, almost a collage.
She's not really part of the background, right? Like, it's a very nice background, but she's not connected to it in any way, unlike Seshiro.
That's absolutely true. She's just kind of leaping from somewhere to somewhere.
I really find the lighting in this very jarring. Like, it looks like she's in a studio in front of a green screen.
It is studio lighting. You're totally right.
It's like a really, really bright studio light and these really deep shadows that just, it feels wrong. She's supposed to be like whispering through the depths of jungle or a forest.
Hunting for untapped steps.
Yeah, jumping through this studio light.
Well, a lot of magic artists use their like wives as models, so maybe this is his wife under studio lighting.
Huh.
His 4-armed snake wife.
Mm-hmm.
He got her to play. He said, "Honey, this is your shot. This is my one chance to really paint you for the world."
Uh-huh.
All right, let's instacut this and just move on with our lives.
Okay,
let's go to Soilshaper. 1 and a G for a 1/1 spirit. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, target land becomes a 3/3 creature until end of turn. It's still a land. We got to get out of the way that the art here is incredible. It's kind of a Rebecca Guay type of like coloring work. It's got a real kind of painterly fairy tale quality to it, which I adore. Incidentally, I bought a stack of foil copies of this, and my Graxaplon foil offer also extends to Soilshaper. If anyone wants a foil Soilshaper, send me an email. I don't think it's super playable, but how about we let you blab about the art first?
I love it so much. The best part about this, like it's colorful in all the right ways without being overwhelming. I really enjoyed the contrastiness to this. It creates this moment where you see this creature coming up out of the earth. You can see the stone in its back and the soil, the grass, these trees. You can sort of see it taking shape as a big creature, and you go, "Oh, that's the Soilshaper." And then you look over on the left side of the card, and you see that the actual Soilshaper is this much smaller, very strange-looking spirit who is shaping the soil and summoning this creature that at least I thought was the Soilshaper at first. So it makes this really fun little moment where you realize who the actual subject of the art is, and it's not what you think it is at first.
It's true. I love that. And we've seen there's a few other pieces in Magic that play this trick. Like there's Callous Oppressor.
Yes.
That has a similar thing where there's like, who's the real focal point of the art here? Yeah, and I love that. You're right. It's a really clever thing in the Soilshaper art. What do you think about the playability? So I have put this in 3 or 4 test decks, and every time I'm just kind of disappointed with it. Like making a 3/3 is good, but not mind-blowing. And it's just really hard in my experience to activate it enough to matter. And for green to be aggressive enough for this to be what you want to do. Like, I feel like green, you're really trying to get to your like 4, 5, and 6s. And like occasionally having a 3/3 is just not good enough.
To me, it reads as like one of the better Spiritcraft abilities. Like getting a 3/3 on a somewhat regular basis is pretty good in a set with so many tiny creatures. A lot of the Spiritcraft triggers that we've seen have been like either situational or just don't have that much impact on the board. This is an ability that can have a pretty immediate impact, both offensively and defensively. So I feel like there's potential here.
I do like the cute factor of activating at an instant speed. I think that's pretty fun, assuming you have enough mana to cast the thing and to, I don't know. I have it as like a Instacut, which might be a little harsh. Where do you have it?
That seems pretty harsh. I have it at playable. Why don't we meet?
Wow, that's a pretty big delta. I'm okay meeting it meh. I feel like if we do, we should maybe have a couple of them so we really give it a chance to prove itself. I'll say if we keep it, like I want to see you try it sometime because I feel like this is, this is to me the inverse of like Serpent Skin, where it reads better than it plays. Like I think it's just not a super good card, even though it looks like very splashy and fun. I don't think it actually does much in practice a lot of the time.
I think having two of them in makes sense, so we can test that out, test that theory, see if there is a situation where he actually does something.
All right, let's call him a double meh.
Double meh. We come now to the last of our snakes in Champions of Kamigawa. Sosuke, son of Seshiro. 2 GG for a 3/4 legendary snake warrior. Other snakes you control get +1/+0. And whenever a warrior you control deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature at end of combat. We've been alluding to this card, both in power level and kind of flavor wise. So Sosuke is Seshiro's son. Sachi, that we talked about earlier, is
No way. What?
Seshiro's daughter.
Really? No. Oh, I guess it does say son of
It
Seshiro.
literally says son of Seshiro.
I may have not read that part. They
Sachi-
both say son and daughter. I've never
Literally
noticed that
in the name of
18
the
years.
card. So the family's all together now.
Sometimes
Austin
I
has
feel
finally
pretty
realized.
underqualified for this podcast in terms of reading comprehension.
Austin has finally read the card. At least the
That's
name
what
of
they
it.
mean by son of Seshiro.
Oh,
He's the son of the card named Seshiro.
I thought it was the other Seshiro.
Oh, well, that's cute. So you got Seshiro at rare, and then he's got a son and a daughter who each give... Oh, and Seshiro gives +2/+2, and his kids give +1/+0 and +0/+1. Sorry, I'm learning all this live, but hopefully it actually increases the emotional impact of this very cute design choice.
Yeah, literally no idea how you did not realize this before. But I'll continue to point out that Sachi gives +0/+1. Sosuke gives +1/+0.
Look, Connor, I'm focusing all my reading comprehension on the effects. I don't have any despair for the name. The effect is enough by itself to tax me.
Okay, well, let's make sure that you got this one then. Sachi has shaman synergy. Sosuke has warrior synergy. Pretty interesting stuff going on. Interesting snake family that we've got here. And Sosuke is he's a bit of a strange card to me. So he has these two tribal kind of lord-like abilities, which are fairly marginal on their own, even if you have other snake warriors. But he's also a 4-mana 3/4, which is like a good stat line for this set. The +1/+0 is obviously more impactful than the +0/+1 you get from Sachi. So he's like, I think he is very strong, and the games we've had where he pops up have proved that. Looking at each ability on its own, you don't go, oh wow, that's a really good card.
Yeah, I read this and go, oh wow, that's a really good card. Mostly because you've resolved it against me a bunch of times, and every time it just is a beating. Like a 4-mana 3/4 with Death Touch is already, I think, pretty reasonable on rate, and then you add that decent relevant ability. If you're going to boost only one, I'd rather boost power than toughness. And I just think like he becomes a threat who must be dealt with. I feel like I often end up pointing premium removal at Sosuke and then lacking removal for Moskami or whatever. Like I think,
yeah, I mean he's definitely a threat. One other thing I wanted to add about his abilities is that it's very strange to me that the warrior synergy side of this, that he gives your warriors Death Touch, it seems so weird, because the Death Touch thing, as we've talked about, it seems like that should be sort of the definitive snake tribal ability, and it's not.
Yes, his ability here should literally be the snake tribal ability.
It should, but he does not give that ability to snakes. He gives it to warriors.
Well, he doesn't need to, because they're, tapping things down.
They're already tapping things. So that's just kind of a weird thing. Yeah, I agree that he's a real beat stick. But I feel like a big part of that is just a 4-mana 3/4 with possible upside.
That's already pretty solid. I mean, he's no Kodama of the North Tree, but he's still really good.
What do you think of the art here? It's extremely green.
Almost entirely green, except the loincloth and his eyes, it is entirely green.
I find it a little off-putting. It's too green. It's kind of repulsive to me.
I don't really have strong feelings about it either way, honestly. It's another one where the extra arms just feel sort of stapled on to his shoulders. I originally was going to say that this is just a magic problem, and I was going to say, if you look at Machamp from like Pokemon, like the Machamp art from base set 2, that really sells the idea of forearms, but actually it's exactly like this. It's like,
it really doesn't. He looks just like Machamp.
I think it's just really hard to do a four-armed guy, is what I'm learning.
Yeah.
And have it be interesting and convincing.
The artist of this snake, Carl Critchlow, also did your favorite snake, Sakura-Tribe Elder. So interesting that he's got, very different takes on the forearms here, very different looking snakes.
That's even weirder. Like, I get why every snake looks different from different artists.
It felt like the creative direction with the snakes was sort of saying, just do whatever you think a four-armed snake person should be. But I almost wonder if there was like an intentional push to have a wide variety of snake people to, maybe represent different snake tribes or something. I don't know.
There are the different tribes, it's true. But I mean, even then, if I compare this to Seshiro,
who is his dad,
and Sachi,
who is his sister,
they don't look that similar. And we know that they're family now.
We know now that they're family.
Like, go look at their heads. Like, if anyone's looking at the spoiler, look at Sachi's head. Seshiro's head is more like a lizard in my mind.
It's extremely snake-like.
Who? Seshiro?
Yeah.
But it's not the same. It's not the same as hers. Hers is like a cobra. It's like wide.
Yeah.
His is narrow. And then Sosuke's is just like a face with snake eyes. Their mom must have looked really different because there's just very little family resemblance here.
Yeah, that's just a snake thing, I guess.
I had this at auto include. I think that's a little bit high, to be honest. It's not all the way up at Kodama the North Tree tier, or obviously not a Rootrunner tier.
I feel like giving him auto include, like if there weren't other snakes in this set, I wouldn't necessarily be very excited about him. I can't fairly call him an auto include if there need to be other snakes around.
Yeah, let's call him a playable.
Playable 1X.
Let's go to Strength of Cedars. 4 and a G for a instant arcane. Target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. I think this card is really quite good. It's obviously horrifically overcosted, but this is Kamigawa, so we have to kind of take that as read. And once you ignore that, Tap on Reddit a couple months ago said that Strength of Cedars was green's equivalent of Devouring Greed, Devouring Rage, randomly dealt 7+ damage to end the game. And that checks out. This turns like some random dumb 1/1 or 2/2 that your opponent neglected to block into like a 6/6 or a 7/7 or an 8/8 and just finishes out the game. And while it's overpriced, I think that's pretty much fine. Because, again, like in a card that you intend to end the game, it's kind of okay for that to be expensive and overpriced. And I think a lot of times this will help you end the game.
I shamelessly read the comment you wrote on this card because you put it here after Tap left that very insightful comment. I really love the comparison. And also being a combat trick, unlike Devouring Greed, which is a sorcery. I sort of feel like 2 copies of this might be possible because this doesn't require any kind of setup to be useful. Like Devouring Greed, Devouring Rage, even Dance of Shadows, you kind of need to have a big enough board to make those work. There's a lot of other stuff you have to do to finish the game with those cards other than just having them. Strength of Cedars, you just need to be playing land.
Yeah, I can see that. I actually wavered 2 between 1 and 2 on this. I think I worried a little bit with 2 about it being a little too easy to pick one up, but I don't think it's oppressive. Like, I don't know that you want 2 of these anyway. I think most of the time 1 of these is fine. So that, I guess to me, that means 2 isn't oppressive, but I also don't know if it's necessary.
Well, I feel like 2 isn't oppressive because I don't think you have a game where like 2 of these are going to get played because it is a game ender. I feel like I want 2 to make this possibility pop up more often when we're drafting.
It's a game ender. It is also kind of green removal, like bad removal. Like green doesn't have any fight effects in this set. So I feel like this is kind of the closest you get to like kill a thing. I'm okay with starting with 2.
I don't think it will be too oppressive, but maybe it will be, or maybe we'll just get tired of seeing both of them float around.
Yeah, I'm more worried about a clogging pack, but I'm fine putting this in at like a playable, like a playable 2X.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, next up we've got Thousand-Legged Kami. 6 GG for a 6/6 spirit with Soul Shift 7. So this card is tied with Promised Kanushi as the second biggest Soul Shifter in the whole block. This would get almost everything back, but I think this is just too big, too dumb, and too slow to ever really be relevant in a game at 8 mana for a 6/6 that doesn't have trample. Also, this art is just disgusting. It's just a giant centipede.
Who wants to look at a centipede, you know? No one.
Yeah.
No one wants to look at centipedes.
We have another one coming up that's another disgusting insect that I think we'll both want to get rid of. But yeah, like who wants to be looking at, and you're going to be looking at this for a long time because it's going to sit in your hand.
Sits in your hand the whole game
as you're waiting for 8 mana.
I think it's nice that this makes the decision pretty easy on us. Like an 8 mana 6/6. I've had this a few times in my deck, and like it just sits in your hand. It just does not get cast at 8 mana. Like even in this format, it's pretty hard to get there. And when you do, it's like, it's good. It's not amazing. It's just good. I think the one thing I'll say for this is that it can get back Moss Kami, which is nice. But honestly,
but so can Promise Kanushi.
It's true. Yeah, exactly. And Promise Kanushi is a more fun card. It's like quirky and brain tickling. And this is just like Vizardrix, but a centipede.
Yeah, super big, super dumb, more expensive Vizardrix. And like, I think what really frustrates me about this is how we keep making these comparisons to modern Magic, and it's not entirely fair because, obviously this set is not operating on that power level. But this just feels so underwhelming by today's big green creature standards. So I looked for, something roughly equivalent, and I found Ancient Brontodon in Ixalan, which is a 9/9 at this same mana cost and is common. I should mention Thousand Light Kami is uncommon.
I mean, this easily could have been like a 7/7 without harming anything, even in Kamigawa. It could have just been the biggest, dumbest green common or uncommon, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not really willing to just give it like a power level pass because it's Kamigawa, because this card was printed in between 2 printings of Vizardrix, which is like the definitive bad, big, dumb 7 mana 6/6.
I'm wondering if Vizardrix is as much of a touchstone for our listeners as he is for us. If you're not familiar, Vizardrix is like a 7 mana 6/6 blue creature with no abilities that inexplicably Wizards shoved into like 3 starter decks in a row, like 7th, 8th, and maybe 9th around the time we were learning Magic as like a...
Yeah, he was in 9th.
New players don't need fun cards. Let's just give them this like the most, not even bad. It doesn't. The problem with Vizardrix is not that it's bad. The problem with Vizardrix is that it's boring, and then it says nothing about blue. Like for 7 mana, blue does cool things. It draws a million cards. It counters a bunch of things. It like fly. At least it flies. It's like it's both boring and actively unhelpful. Anyway, this isn't a Vizardrix rant. This is a Thousand Light Kami rant. But Thousand Light Kami is also boring, and that feels unforgivable. How about making an 8/6? That would have been fun too.
Also, go if you're not familiar, go look up Vizardrix so you can see what it looks like.
It does have fun art. This is not a snake, but I realized one more thing I want to say about the snakes. Because really this episode is we complain about the art of the snake people in Kamigawa.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'm realizing about the snakes is if you look at Neon Dynasty, those snakes all have tails. They don't have legs. And they look a lot more like snakes because, the defining thing about snakes is that they don't have legs.
Yep. That's what they're known for.
And as a result, the modern Orochi work a lot better.
Yeah, they do still have the 4 arms, though.
Yeah, and somehow the 4 arms work better. I don't know if that's a technical thing or what, but they all kind of look a little smoother.
Yeah.
Huh. One cute little Neon Dynasty thing is, I don't know if you have Tales of Master Seshiro up, but if you look at the flip side of that flip card, the flip cards in Neon Dynasty are like callbacks to the original Kamigawa. And even though all the other snakes in this set do not have legs, Seshiro's Living Legacy, the backside of that, does have legs because he's Seshiro and he had legs. Which makes me wonder, when did the snakes of Kamigawa lose their legs in the history of the plane? If anyone knows, let me know.
That is a great question.
Yeah, I don't know if that's addressed somewhere or if I need to write Mark Rosewater, but I want to know.
Subject line: when did the snakes lose their legs?
I feel like Mark Rosewater would answer that email.
I think he would.
Is this an Instacut for you, though?
Definitely.
All right, let's look at Time of Need. 1 and a G for a sorcery. Search your library for a legendary creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Then shuffle. So it's a 2-mana tutor for legendary creatures. I'm amazed this card doesn't show up more. It's only in 5,800 decks on EDH, and for a format that is centered around commanders, that where tutors are really good, that is astonishing to me. I mean, obviously you don't need it to grab your commander, but it's just really bizarre to me that in a format full of playable legendaries, that this card sees so little play and has only been printed twice, and really once because one of those was on the time shifted sheet in Time Spiral Remastered. Really strange to me that this doesn't show up more in decks or in play or in conversation.
Yeah, the reprinting part was very weird to me when I actually went to look, because I sort of thought of this as like made for EDH and a card that could fit into a lot of decks there, and it's just been
Yeah, it does look great in that Time Spiral Remastered printing in the time shifted sheet. Like, I noticed you said in your comments that this is like some really old school looking magic art, and when you put it in the old border on Time Spiral Remastered, it fits like right in. It's really fun.
yeah, it was like made for the old border.
Like, look how I love this guy. He's so bulky ringing that bell. It's great. It's the Junkyo bell, right? It's the iconic bell.
Yeah, and they need it.
They need it, and they need a big guy to ring it. You can't have a small guy ring a bell that big.
What do you think of this card in the cube? I have it as a 1x playable because I feel like there are, we've included enough legendaries that this would be fun to have, I think.
Yeah, I really like it. I think there's lots of legendaries in the block. It's obviously a key theme. You use this to go get a dragon, and you're really happy about that. Like, I think this card's really good. I have it as a meh for some reason, but again, I think like I'm just clicking wrong buttons or something. This is a clear playable to me.
Yeah.
It would have been cool if this fetched any legendary permanent instead of just creatures. I think it would be really fun to think of the interactions with like legendary lands and like legendary artifacts and stuff. That would have been cute.
Yeah. But the creature thing does kind of make more thematic sense. You're ringing the bell.
They're answering the call.
They come running through the woods. All right, one last thing on this card before we move on. The flavor text here ties perfectly into the next card. When the Kumo attacked the monk's sacred shrine, a mournful toll for help echoed through the forest. Thus began the Battle of Silk, which would last 6 years. And then let's just move right into Venerable Kumo, our next card, 4G, for a 2/3 spirit with reach and soul shift 4. So the Kumo are these big, really just disgusting looking spider spirits, and who apparently were attacking the monk's shrine and causing the time of need.
Can you imagine a 6-year battle against giant spiders? Ugh.
I do not want to think about that, and I can't imagine a 6-year battle against a 5-mana 2/3 reach.
Those monks need to try harder.
they gotta up their game, because these Kumo are not
the Order
a problem.
of the Sacred Bell in there. They're right there. It's in the name. Get them to come and beat the crap out of this thing.
I mean, they should be there at the bell.
What are they doing? Are they slacking off?
I don't know what they're doing if they're not fighting Kumo. But this card is just so... All 2 of the Kumo we've seen have just been disgusting
gross
looking. They took spiders and made them somehow nastier. And the stat line on this is also just nasty and miserable.
Yeah, this thing reads bad and plays worse in my experience. Like, it just doesn't do anything. Like, 5 mana for a 2/3 just does not have enough board impact. Having reach, it's not enough reach to matter in a lot of cases. Or it's not enough stat lines for the reach to matter. Like, this is just a bad card.
And I don't think that the soul shift saves it. Just having that on a card that's otherwise just bad is not enough.
How many other soul shift 4s are there? Like, do we have other ways to? Because there's a lot of 4s you want to get back, right? You want Kodama, you want Rootrunner, of course. You want Gibbering Kami. So, like, are there other soul shift 4s around? Okay, there are. We got Forked Branch Garami and Betrayers, which is great. We've got Harbinger of Spring, He Who Hungers, 100 Talon Kami, Scuttling Death, and Tori Watchword. So we got plenty of options.
And I think Forked Branch Garami has it twice, right? So that's...
Yeah, is this just an insta-cut for you? Like, it's bad and it's a gross spider. To me, that's a clear insta-cut.
Yeah.
Gross.
Get it out.
Might even hide the row in the spreadsheet. Let's go to Vine Kami. 6 and a G for a 4/4. This is Kamigawa for you. It's got Menace, although it doesn't say so on the card, and Soul Shift 6. So I feel like we had a good string of like hits and near misses for much of this episode, and then we come to Venerable Kumo and Vine Kami, and I think we're pretty firmly in miss territory at this point. Like, a 7-mana 4/4 with Menace is just not... I just don't think it's an acceptable stat line. I like that it gets back Moss Kami, I guess, but I really can't think of anything else nice to say about this card mechanically.
Can also get you Venerable Kumo back.
Okay, not in our cube though.
Or a Spirit Dragon. I don't know. I think you're probably right, but this is kind of a soft spot card for me for reasons I can't defend very strongly.
I don't need you to defend it, but I am curious why. Like, what about it?
I really like the art and kind of the idea of this card for some reason. So Vine Kami and Moss Kami, just like name wise, thematically, it feels like they go together. You know, one's a 6 mana 5/5, the other's a 7 mana 4/4. Like they feel like they should be related somehow. They're both kind of these gods of like low key, mundane forest growth, but they're some of the biggest cards that green has.
Well, not in a stat line sense, but
Not in a cost sense, at least. And just kind of like hearing those names, Moss Kami, Vine Kami, you would expect them to be really similar artistically, but they take these completely different interpretations of Kami. You know, Moss Kami is very photorealistic, almost looks so much like moss that you can't quite tell that there's a creature there. And then this one, Vine Kami, is this gigantic, bizarre, otherworldly being with all these different fantastic elements thrown together. You've got this mask and a big horn on the end of a long vine neck, all these ribbons everywhere. It's like very, very Japanese stylistically done by a Japanese artist. There's just something about those two cards next to each other, both being these, you know, kind of big, dumb green creatures, and how different they are. I don't know. Something about it just kind of tickles me.
Yeah, I do quite like the art here. I'm wondering if part of why you're tickled is you'll never guess what else Tsutomu Kawade did, but he did Drimpic Tongue Zubera.
There you go.
Yeah, I like the art here quite a lot. I like that, you know, it's not what you would, if you just hear Vine Kami, I think you would picture kind of like Tangela from Pokemon Red and Blue.
I had never thought of that.
Right, though? Isn't that kind of what you would just imagine if you just heard Vine Kami? But instead, it's kind of like humanoid-ish, but with parts elongating everywhere. Like his fingers feel a little bit too long. There's like vines growing out around the head. The neck is a giant vine. His hands appear to be made of layers of vine. So yeah, it's kind of a less literal take on it. Still gets the idea across in an effective, creepy way.
Yeah.
I had this in an Instacut on power level, but I think it's defensible barely. So if you want to try to sneak 1 or 2 in, I'm open to that.
I kind of like having one, like 7 mana 4/4 is obviously garbage, but like 4/4 with menace like is actually going to be a problem.
Yeah, so sometimes because it'll kill 2 bears and then get back a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, when you think about it like that, or it kills a hill giant and dies to the second creature and then soul shifts a Moss Kami, I guess that's pretty solid.
Yeah, or you know, your opponent only has 1 creature. Vine Kami's getting in for 4.
Yeah. I don't know how your opponent got to that stage of the game with your opponent having 1 creature, but possible.
It happens.
Yeah. I think it's a meh though, right? I don't feel like this is a very high grade.
No, it's a meh.
1x meh.
Last green card, last colored card of Champions of Kamigawa right here.
Wow. It's been such a journey.
I know, that's crazy to think about. 250 cards deep here.
Wow.
Wear away. GG for an instant arcane, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and you can splice it onto arcane for 3G. This is fine, I guess, as a artifact enchantment removal option.
Uh-huh.
It's a weird card to end the episode on because there's just so little to talk about.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I kind of feel like the same. I feel like I'm almost harsher on this than I normally would be, just because it's like the last card, and it's so like for a lot of the other colors by coincidence. Like I think for white, didn't we end on like Yosei or something? Like we happen to have ended on, you know, pretty cool cards.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we ended
Yosei,
blue on Wandering Ones, which is, you know,
we ended red on Zozu,
sure.
And black on Wicked Akuba. So
yeah, so those are some hits, and then Wandering Ones at least has great art. And this thing is the naturalize for the set. There are 2 other naturalizes in the block. There's Tarashi's Grasp and Betrayers, which is 2 and a W for a naturalize that also gains you life and has pretty bad art. And then Rending Vines in Saviors is a naturalize for 1 GG that can only hit if the mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards in your hand because it's Saviors, but it does draw you a card.
Oh my god.
So, you know, this is probably the best of the naturalizes in the block.
I think so.
My experience of naturalizes, it's fine in limited and it's fine in cube. You know, it's a funny card because it basically never makes the main deck except in really unusual environments. But you're usually fine picking one up a little bit late in the draft and sometimes bringing it in and out of the sideboard. There's a lot of artifacts and enchantments in the block. There's 104. but I think that oversells the importance of killing them, to be honest, because most of them are not that good.
Yeah. A lot of them, I think you're going to be fine with them sticking around for a little while.
Yeah, in exchange for not having to put this in your deck. Like, particularly the splice here is kind of like, I just feel like the number of times you need to splice this are going to be vanishingly small.
It's already kind of unusual to have the game where you really, really need to have naturalize. If you do have that game, you sideboard this in. But then to need to have the ability to naturalize twice for a total of 6 mana, pretty hard to imagine.
The fact that it costs GG is pretty awkward too, because I feel like, naturalize is a card you kind of want to be sort of splashable. It's like I really need to kill this one thing they have that I have no other answer for. And at GG, this doesn't really play out that way.
Now that you point that out, you've got the splice that only costs 1G, so it's kind of an interesting way of...
It's 3G.
Being
3G. Oh, you mean one designated?
I meant one. Yeah, that was confusing. One designated green mana. So it's like you have the option of sort of playing this in a deck that's less committed to green, but it's going to cost you more and also require you to have another arcane. I'm not saying that's good, but it's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah. I have this in a meh.
Yep.
I had it at 2x, but now that I know there's 2 other naturalize effects, I think a singleton is fine.
Let's go with meh 1x.
Well, I think we've just about worn away our time here tonight, and I'm all out of arcane spells to splice on today's running time to extend it. If you have feedback, thoughts, or memories to share about any of the cards or topics today, whether that's Wear Away and that terrible non-pun, or the art of the Orochi, or you believe Moss Kami really is as good as Baneslayer Angel, you can always email us at clockspinningpodcast@gmail.com or comment on Reddit. We read every comment and every email. It's super fun to get them. You can also follow along with the Cube on Cube Cobra. You can just go to clockspinning.com for a link to the Cube, as well as to find past episodes. And next episode, we will be reviewing the final cards of Champions of Kamigawa, the artifacts, the lands, and we'll also talk about the mana base of the cube. Big episode, big moment for us, but until then, I'm Austin.
And I'm Connor.
Thanks for listening.